Chapter 61, The Magic Circles of the 6th Floor. After discovering the circle leading to the 4th floor, we finished thoroughly mapping the 3rd. Obviously, there was no sign of Zenith, so we decided to move on. The walls of the 4th floor were made of a type of stone that looked familiar to me. They resembled the ruins we had accessed to teleport here from the Northern Territories. Perhaps they were similar structures, except this one had been turned into a labyrinth. "Jess, what is it?" Paul asked. "Well, it seems we're doing well," he replied. "Great. Then let's explore the 4th level a bit before we return to the surface," Paul said, coldly looking in my direction as I examined our surroundings. "Gino, enemies," Elinalize said. I looked up and found 2 4-armed armored monsters approaching. These monsters are considered undead, by the way. With a simple long sword of light, the 2 rusty armors were cut in half like butter. Paul and the others hadn't even noticed the enemies, and they were already finished. After I killed several armored warriors, we started back to the surface. The route up took us approximately 5 hours on foot. This search was going to take us a while. We were in a good moment. Keeping this pace would benefit us the most. We all gathered for a meeting as soon as we arrived in the city. There were several items we would need for our next adventure, so we set about collecting them. Jess bought some chemicals that were supposed to be effective on armored monsters. He informed us that, if aimed well, this material would wrap around the creature's joints and slow down their movement. Paul and Elinalize set out to search for weapons. Apparently, they were trying to find a second-hand sword for Elinalize. The one she was currently using, her rapier, was a magic item. When she brandished it, it unleashed a blast of vacuum, which was not the most appropriate for fighting armored warriors. I could understand why she wanted a different weapon. Elinalize bought a single gladius, one that apparently had the ability to emit a shockwave. When pushed forward, it didn't do much damage, but it allowed its wielder to gain some distance from his opponent, sending him flying backwards. That made it quite useful, so it cost a good amount of money, but Elinalize just grabbed a round crystal from her pocket and made the purchase. That night, Roxy and Talhand, the latter, invited me, saying, "It doesn't matter if you're not of age. No one will judge you here," he said. That was true, but I never liked alcohol, but I had nothing to do, so I went with them. It was supposed to be a meeting between 2 magicians and a swordsman, but after a while the Professor Talhand started giving us a lecture on what makes a man a real man. According to him, men must have muscles, and magnificent muscles meant a magnificent spirit. It wasn't a conversation for everyone, but he was right. Men must be muscular and strong. Roxy just sat next to me sleepily. It was clear that she couldn't be less interested, although I couldn't blame her. The next day, Lilia said goodbye to us as we dove back into the labyrinth. Our journey to the 4th floor was uneventful. This was partly due to our elaborate preparations and the shifting of gears, but we were also lucky. It was basically a straight shot up here. Time-wise, it only took us 3 hours, and we didn't have any run-ins with monsters either. Once there, we continued on to the map of the 4th level instead of moving on, but to the surprise of everyone but me, Zenith was nowhere to be seen. As our supplies were still good, we went down to begin conquering the 5th floor. On this level, the armored warriors were joined by the devouring demons. But the devouring demons climbed up to the ceiling, so only Roxy and I could do anything about them. "Very well, it's time for our secret weapon," Jess said. There was an innovative countermeasure for these pests recorded in the pages of an exploratory account of the teleportation labyrinth. The roots of the talfro tree were sold for consumption, but if you burned them as incense, the devouring demons would come down from the ceiling. They hated the smell. And so, in the blink of an eye, we made it past the 5th floor. Unable to locate the circle leading to the next floor, we were forced to wander around a bit. But our goal wasn't to explore the place. We were here to find Zenith. Everything was going well. In fact, we were doing great. Finally, we reached the 6th floor. "So, Jess," Paul asked, "can we move on?" Jess replied we had barely used our provisions, so we were well prepared. We were on a roll. "Okay, there's no turning back. Let's keep going then," Paul replied. "Yeah," we all replied in unison. There was no need to go back. As we had provisions and were prepared, our search would continue. The 6th floor was covered in devouring devils. The armored warriors disappeared completely, leaving only the annoying crawlers on the ceiling. The fights went off without a hitch thanks to the incense, but there were still too many of them. So many, in fact, that one wondered, why are there so many of them here? The reason became clear when we entered the deeper parts of the 6th floor. There, in the room leading to the next magic circle, there was a nest. A swarm of beasts crowded inside it, and countless eggs were found at the edges of the area. They were dark, oblong shapes covered in liquid, like the cockroaches from my old world. It gave me the creeps just looking at them. If you're wondering, these damn bugs, as well as those in the other labyrinths, feed only on mana. Suddenly, I felt someone pulling on the sleeve of my shirt. I turned to the side, and it was Roxy. Help me destroy these eggs as we find them. They'll be a thorn in our side next time we come back, she said, so I followed her, and we started impaling the eggs. Anyway, so the monsters produced eggs. I wonder if the armored warriors also had offspring. I imagine a miniature version of them as big as a felt doll, carrying a toy sword and waddling around. The other 3 rooms attached to this one were also filled with the stuff. There was no sign of any of them being about to hatch. Our cleanup ended without a hitch after that. Finally, we reached the depths of the labyrinth, the same place spoken of in the last pages of our book. It was a square and spacious room built out of stone. There were 3 magic circles near one of the walls facing away from the entrance to the room. I knew these places lead to nothing, but I couldn't just discover the secret wall. It's the Guardian, Elinalize said. It does give that feeling, Paul agreed. Gino, don't lose your cool, Roxy warned. The 3 of them kept their weapons close as they talked. Maybe it was common for the room preceding the Guardian's lair to have an eerie vibe. Well, what are you going to do? Jess said, holding the book in one hand as he investigated each circle. Everyone else stood by the entrance waiting. Me, for my part, I returned to the place where we had been. This is where the secret staircase was, but I couldn't tell yet. But for some reason, Roxy slipped behind me. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing, just that those circles give me a bad feeling. They don't seem like the way to the Guardian, I said. Roxy blinked several times while looking at me bewildered. How are you so sure about that? She asked. Well, let's say that this structure is very familiar to me. I muttered, and Roxy tried to look at my expression, but blushed and looked away. W, what do you mean by that? She muttered. These ruins look very familiar to me, with others I've already been to, the ones I used to get back here so quickly. I muttered. Ruins, she said, bewildered. Yes, ruins. In those ruins, there were 4 rooms. The first 3 were empty, and the 4th was a staircase down that led to a teleportation circle, I said, pointing around. As expected, Roxy immediately understood what I was saying and opened her eyes wide. You, used, she tried to speak, but I motioned for her to be quiet, and she listened to me. I knelt down and put my head sideways on the ground. I took out my small sword, and with the handle, I started hitting the ground. Tack, 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 plack. I started hitting the ground until I heard a hollow part. I quickly stood up with a smile while Roxy looked at me. I approached her and stood behind her. Can you please throw a stone bullet in that direction? I said as I took her arm and made her point in the desired direction. She flinched at my touch but nodded. The stone bullet quickly embedded itself in the ground, leaving a huge hole, and the remains of the rubble began to fall. You were right, she muttered. What the hell was that? Paul shouted as he came in alarmed along with the others. Paul, I discovered another teleportation circle, I said, pointing at the hole in the wall. Huh, let me see, Jess said as he peeked in. Ah, that's right, it's amazing, boss. Jess shouted excitedly as he began to remove the rubble. It didn't take long for the cavity to widen, transforming it into a square-shaped opening. Beneath it, a staircase cascaded down towards a pink magic circle. Okay, everyone, the boss has found a hidden staircase. Jess shouted, and the others came closer to us. Gah ha ha. I knew you would. Talhan burst out laughing, giving me a hard slap on the back, making me stumble forward. Good job, kid, Paul said out loud, following Talhan's example. This makes sense. I seem to remember that the ruins of the teleportation circle looked similar, Elinalize said, giving me a hard slap on the back. Ugh, I muttered in pain. Don't get too nervous, boss, Jess said at the same time. I felt someone pull my arm. I looked to my side, and it was Roxy with her small hand raised in the air. Our eyes met, and her hand gently stopped on my back, caressing me. "You've done a good job," she murmured, totally blushing. I took her hand and kissed it. "No problem. Let's go," I said. She stuttered, blushing, and when I turned around, Paul had his eyes rolled back, and Lionel's was holding back a smile. "All right, let's get going. Stay alert, everyone," Jess said. "Yeah," they all said in unison. Up until this point, all the teleportation circles had emitted a pale light, but this one was red, a color that indicated danger. The words "red zone" came to my mind. "It's here, beyond this point," Paul muttered. "What is it, Paul?" "We still have supplies, but we can turn around for now if you want," Jess said. "No, let's move on. Everyone check your equipment," Paul said. "Understood," I said. Hearing Paul's decision, we all dropped to the ground and began to examine our equipment. I sat down on the ground, and Roxy quickly sat next to me, checking her equipment. "Hey, I have some advanced magic scrolls. Do you want some?" she asked. Do you have any healing scrolls?" "I like some of those, please," I said. Roxy handed me 3, and I folded them and put them in my robe. If I didn't end up using them, I could return them later. "I have no idea what kind of guardian we're up against, but we have plenty of firepower. I'll work as hard as I can to support you, so you don't have to use any of those scrolls," Roxy said, snuggling up next to me. "Thank you so much, and the same goes for you," I replied. "Roxy, take this," Lionel said as she handed a mana crystal to Roxy. "Use it in case you run out of mana. If you don't use it, you give it back to me," she said. "Oh, sure. Understood," she replied. "All right, is everyone ready?" Paul said. Upon hearing his voice, we all stood up. I looked at everyone, and even Roxy had a tense face. "All right, let's go then," he said. We exchanged glances with each other and jumped into the circle all at the same time. Chapter 61, The Guardian of the Teleportation Labyrinth. The area we entered was huge, looking like a palace reception hall. Modeled in an oblong shape the size of a baseball field, there were thick pillars in the corners of the room, and the ceiling was so high you had to crane your neck back to see it. The floor beneath our feet was covered in tiles, each of which was etched with its own intricate pattern, forming a relief. If I had to choose one word to describe the place, it would be majestic. "Whoa!" Jess gasped. There was a monster located deep within this palace-like structure. The Manatite Hydra, roughly twice the size of a red WRYM. Even from a distance, I could make out the gleam of its emerald green scales, as well as its short, sturdy body and the numerous heads sticking out of it. "That thing is a Hydra!" I shouted dramatically. "There it is!" Paul screamed, his eyes not focused on the monster. There, just past the Hydra, inside the room it protected, was a single magically imbued crystal, one of magnificent size. He had never seen anything so large. There, inside the crystal, Zenith was imprisoned. "Zenith!" Paul screamed at the top of his lungs. Not even a second passed, and Paul was already charging toward the Hydra. "Fucking asshole. Don't rush!" Jess screamed, "TC." Lionel's clicked her tongue and ran after him, as did Talhand, but neither could catch up. I took a deep breath, with my swords in each hand. It's time to test the result of more than a decade of training. "Roxy, that's a Hydra Minati. Your magic attacks won't work," I said in a harsh voice. Roxy put on a tense expression and pressed her staff to her chest. "So what are we going to do?" she asked in desperation. "First, we have to make Paul see reason." "Stay here," I said. I crouched slightly and shot forward, leaving shockwave. I passed in front of Talhand, Lionel's, and finally Paul until I reached the Hydra, all this in less than a second. The Hydra didn't even have time to react, and I cut off 2 of its heads. If I could do it fast, maybe I'll have a chance. "Guiyu Oea!" Paul's deafening scream was so fierce that it reached my ears. This time the Hydra had time to react and moved its head like a snake, attacking Paul when he approached. He was sharp and precise in dodging, moving only as much as necessary, but when he attacked, his sword only bounced off the Hydra's scales with a dull sound. "What the fuck?" he screamed, momentarily losing concentration. I clicked my tongue in frustration and lunged at him to get him out of the Hydra's way, and in the process cut off 2 more heads. The Hydra had 9 heads, and I had already cut off 4. "TCH, get out of my way!" Paul screamed as he ran back towards the Hydra. I did the same, attacking the 6th and 7th heads. "Yah!" Paul screamed again and again. His sword bounced off the Hydra's scales. "Damn asshole! Get out!" I screamed as I headed toward the 8th head, but it veered at the last moment towards Paul. "Paul!" Alinalize finally caught up with him, armed herself with a shield, and threw her weapon forward, intercepting the Hydra head. Pling! Alinalize's weapon bounced off the scales as well, and an invisible sound sling traveled through the air. I changed trajectory in the air and threw a long sword of light at Alinalize's attacking head, cutting it off with one slash. Just one. I fell into a dive, and the last head tried to intercept me in the air, but with a precise movement, I sliced it and it fell to the ground, but the first heads I cut had regenerated shit. Out of nowhere, a pillar of earth appeared above us, falling straight to the Hydra. Pah! Talon's magic was destroyed in an instant. Does magic not work against that thing? Talon howled. "Retreat!" I screamed as I fell to the ground, cutting off a head. By this point, the other heads had already regenerated. I could fight this monster alone, but I can't protect Paul and the others at the same time. However, my voice didn't reach Paul. He was shouting fierce battle cries while hitting the Hydra with his sword without managing to do any damage to it. This was endangering both him and Alinalize, who was supporting him. "Jess!" Talhan screamed. Jess ran out. Passing Talhan and running behind Paul, he grabbed something in his hand and threw it at the Hydra. Pop-hang! An explosion occurred, and a thick cloud of smoke spread, with the Hydra in the center. It was a smoke bomb. Jess screamed something as he put his arms under Paul's, immobilizing him from behind. However, Jess was not enough to hold Paul, and in seconds he was about to shake him off until Alinalize hit Paul in the head with her shield. Paul let out a cry of pain, but nothing more. Alinalize broke away from his grip, uttered some words that I could not catch, and Paul began to run towards us. "Gino!" Alinalize called me, and with resignation, I returned to them. Roxy cast a spell and caused a thick fog, a smoke screen. Through this, I could hear the rumblings of the creature approaching, but fortunately, it wasn't that fast, so Paul and the others were able to get back to where we were. "Gino, let's go back. Let's go back to the magic circle," Roxy said. She led the way, and we jumped into the teleportation circle. Everyone arrived safely on the other side. Roxy, Talhand, and Jess, as well as Paul, who moved like a caged tiger. Then, finally, Alinalize appeared, wounded from behind him, blood dripping from a wound she had made on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Just a scratch," she murmured with a smile. She had a considerable part of her shoulder torn off. "Her scale cut me," she murmured. Roxy's basic level healing magic was enough to close the wound. In my previous world, the same wound would have required dozens of stitches, but magic was still convenient. Paul stood in front of the magic circle, staring at it, killing intent oozing from his body like a snowy mist. "Paul!" I called out to him. "That was Zenith, I'm sure," he murmured, his eyes not even registering Alinalize's injury. "Please calm down a bit," I urged. "Yes, it was my fault. I'm fine now." Paul's voice was low. He was still, but his head wasn't cold, and the words "the calm before the storm" came to mind. I couldn't do much about it. It would be weird if he had reacted differently, but we have to make him calm down. It's time to tell my plan. "For now, let's put ourselves in our current situation," I said, looking at the group. I ignored Paul's bravado and spoke to the group. "Magic didn't work on that Guardian. He has an incredible regenerative capacity, and his offensive force is so overwhelming that he overcame Miss Alinalize's defenses just by touching her," I said. Everyone listened in silence, including Paul, who looked at me with a frown. "That I'll let that go for the moment. Ahem. As for Zenith being crystallized, I think there's something we can do about it," she said, sounding as cheerful as usual. "Really?" Paul said, looking more relieved. "Yes, I've heard occasional stories of powerful magic items encased in magic crystals. Once we defeat the Guardian, the crystal will dissolve and we can get it out. Or at least, that's what the stories say," she said. "Yes, I know what you're talking about. I know of another person who was once like Zenith is now, and they're still alive," Alinalize said suddenly. Everyone looked at her with skepticism, except me. Obviously, I already knew about Alinalize, aka Rostalina's past. Our problem is that guardian. Honestly, I've never seen a monster of that variety, she continued. I'm not joking. I can tell by looking at it that it's a hydra, but I've never heard of one with green scales, Jess continued. Not only that, the thing can also regenerate, Talhan said with a worried look and with his hands crossed in front of him. A hydra was a type of dragon, a lone wolf with multiple heads, with unmatched strength from what she knew. They were supposed to inhabit some parts of the demon continent. There were 3 varieties currently confirmed. Gino mentioned that it was a mana hydra. I've read about it in a book. It's an infernal dragon whose entire body was covered in magical stone scales that absorb mana. It was seen during the Second Great Human-Demon War, and according to the book, they were wiped out when the continent split. I was sure it was nothing more than a fairy tale, but it seems it exists, she muttered. If what I've read is true, we should be able to hit it with my spells as long as I cast them at point-blank range, Roxy continued. It will still revive even if you damage it. What are we supposed to do about that? Talhan grumbled. It was time to tell my plan. I have an idea, I said, raising my hand. Everyone present turned to look at me expectantly. As everyone has noticed, I was the only one who could hurt that monster. But no matter what I do, it always regenerates. But luckily, I think I have an idea that can work. I once read a story about a hero called Hercules who fought against a hydra. He cut off its heads, and with a torch, he burned the stumps, preventing it from regenerating. I can't guarantee the veracity of this story, but we don't lose anything by trying. I said, we can't fight carrying the torches, but it won't be able to reflect magic if we hit it where it's hurt, Elinalize murmured. Well, then let's try it, Jess agreed. Hey, Paul, are you okay with this? Jess muttered that yes, he replied. That's not much of an answer. Are you listening? Gino is the only one who can cut that thing's head off. Jess said in exasperation it was possible that he, along with Elinalize and Talhan, could damage the creature's scales, but they couldn't cut them off. Only I could do the cutting, and Roxy would cauterize the open wound. The division of roles was necessary here, even if it meant Paul not participating in the fight. The 3 of them could act together to protect Roxy, and she would heal them if they took any damage. That was how we divided up the roles. That was how it had to be. Ugh. Elinalize, Talhan, Jess, Roxy, and Gino. Paul let out a sigh and looked at all of us. You've all helped me so far. It's been years since the mana disaster. You crossed the demon continent for me. You searched for Rudy in the northern territories for me. You went to lengths I couldn't even dream of, he muttered. The 4 of them watched him in silence, in a way that seemed to say, hurry up and spit it out already, but now that's over. Either we save her Dot, or, assuming she's not alive, at least my entire family will be accounted for. This is the end. Please lend me your strength this last time, he said. The 4 of them laughed and nodded. It's not your style to act so humble. But I understand. I'll give it my all. Elinalize said, There's no idiot who would say no after coming this far, Talhan said. I'm sure you've calmed down over the years. Well, it's not like I'll be much help, but I'll still do what I can. The macaque joined in. We're going to win this. We'll be rewarded for our efforts once we claim victory, she said in an eloquent tone. I guess it's my turn now. I've only been with your group for a couple of days, but I've already grown fond of you. And I'm only in it for the money, I said with a mocking smile. This was effective as there was laughter, and Paul looked down with a small smile. Touched by our words, Paul seemed to choke back his runny tears, but he didn't let us see him cry. In the end, Paul fixed his gaze on me. His eyes were watery and his lips were trembling. Gino, please save my wife, he said. I smiled at him and nodded. Consider it done, Paul. I said, well, let's get going, he said, and we all stood up. Our rematch with the Hydra is about to begin. Chapter 62, easier than expected, the Hydra forms an imposing figure, waiting for me in that spacious room. Behind it is a crystal imbued with mana, and inside it was Zenith. It has never been explained how she got there. The only possible explanation is that she had very bad luck and ended up teleported in there directly. But it was not the time for that. Okay, let's do this. Paul stepped forward, crouched on the ground, and ran out like a dog. Behind him were Elinalize, Talhan, and Roxy. Okay, you already did it once. Now let's kill that bitch Hydra. I muttered to myself. I am fast. I eat losers for breakfast. I didn't have breakfast today. Leaving those thoughts aside, I crouched slightly leaning forward, my short sword in my left hand and Dragon Phoenix in my right. In a thousandth of a second, I shot forward, leaving behind me an expanding slingshot. In the blink of an eye, I was ahead of Roxy, Talhand, Elinalize, and Paul. The Hydra had no time to react. To me, it was moving in slow motion. I made a huge leap. There were 3 heads heading towards Paul, and they were together. That was my first chance. With a long sword of light, I decapitated the 3 heads like butter, but they stayed in place due to the speed at which I was moving. I stopped applying speed to myself and fell to the ground along with the heads. That's it. I shouted to Roxy, but they were barely on their way. Shit, I got too far ahead. Rhea! Paul roared as he reached the Hydra, and with a quick movement, 3 more heads of the Hydra moved to attack. The beast was fast for its size, agile enough that each of its heads looked like a wild snake as it moved. Elinalize arrived at the right moment, deflecting one of the heads with her shield. Piece of cake, I shouted, cutting off the other 2 heads with ease. Roxy had arrived and immediately began chanting her spell. May this fiery flame burn with your blessing. Flamethrower, she shouted, and a huge fireball shot out towards one of the Hydra's necks. Fortunately, it hit the target and the neck burned. 1 second, 0.2 seconds, 0.3 seconds. It works, I shouted. Okay, just like we planned. Everyone protect Roxy, Paul shouted. 2 heads had already regenerated, but it wasn't a problem as I immediately cut them off again. 6 cut and 1 burned. Hurry up, Roxy, I shouted as I headed towards the second head. I began to run slowly in circles, and the 2 remaining heads began to follow me, but one immediately changed direction towards Paul's group. Fortunately, with their combined efforts, they were able to repel it. I gently jumped back, and with the short sword, I cut the second to last head like butter. There was only 1 head left, and Roxy already cast another spell. Now, there are 3 burned. The remaining head must have realized its impending death, so it started to take steps back. But the last head started to create fire in its mouth. 2 of its heads regenerated and did the same. He's going to use his fire breath. I screamed at the top of my lungs. Shit, we're screwed. I started to run towards Paul's group as the heads charged up their attack. We only had 3 burned, and by this point the other 3 had regenerated and started charging fire again. Fear started to fill my head momentarily as I caught up to Paul and the others. Everyone, get behind me, I screamed. Paul and the others listened to me, and Roxy took the opportunity to hug me from behind. Shit, Roxy, conjure a wall of water, I screamed as I silently conjured my own wall of water. She looked at me stupefied, as did the others, but it was not the time for that. That wall of water, she finished conjuring. Almost instantly, the creature exhaled. From 6 mouths of the Hydra sprang tremendous flames that fell in a nosedive towards us and crashed against our water barrier. Huge columns of steam shot out, heating the entire room. I immediately began to sweat. The force of the flame made me step back. Roxy was not having it any better. The poor girl fought with all her strength until Elinalize held her by the back to stabilize her. I felt like my mana was draining in torrents just by holding this wall of water. The dragon's breath was famous for its terrible heat. It could melt steel or evaporate a small swamp in an instant. And right now, 6 of those heads had expelled that same breath. An ordinary magician alone would not have been able to defend himself against it. But I had Roxy on my side. Fortunately, the heads ran out of fuel and stopped throwing fire at us. I looked to my side, and Roxy was almost out of breath. I unsheathed my swords again, but the pain ran through the palms of my hands. When I looked at my hands, they were raw. Gino, your hands! Roxy screamed, but I didn't focus on her. The Hydra was coming towards us again. Hurry up, Roxy! I screamed as I lunged at the Hydra again. That water barrier used up more than half of my reserves. I felt significantly weaker, but that didn't matter. I jumped up and cut off 2 of the heads with a long sword of light. May this burning flame burn with your blessing. Flamethrower, she shouted, and the fireball successfully hit the necks, burning them to charcoal. May this flame. Roxy began to chant another spell, and I lunged at the heads that were coming towards me. With the small sword, I cut the first one in half. I did a flip in the air and threw a long sword of light at the second. Flamethrower, Roxy shouted. Again, the heads were successfully burned. What are you doing? Paul shouted. Oh no, bitch. I won't let you. I shouted. One of the remaining heads was trying to tear the burned skin off one of their necks, but I cut it off before it had time. Roxy, I called out, and another fireball shot out, successfully burning one of the necks again. By this time, the Hydra was desperate and began to swing its severed necks like mallets. It was its last strategy. Roxy is the last one. I shouted as I lunged toward the last head. I dodged two necks without cutting them obviously. The other necks were heading towards Roxy, but between a lionelized paw and towel hand, they were able to protect her. With a long sword of light from a distance, the last head was cut off. Flamethrower! Roxy screamed, and the last neck was cut off. The Hydra's body began to twist until it crashed into a pair of pillars and finally fell to the ground lifeless. Ugh, ugh, I complained breathlessly. My hands were bleeding deeply, and I felt considerably tired due to the enormous drain on my mana. I looked around. Roxy, Paul, Elinalized, Talhand, that everyone was fine. Even that asshole, just though I wish he'd die, but let's leave that for another time. We did it, Paul muttered with a big smile as he looked at the now corpse of the Hydra. Gino, Roxy came running towards me. Your hands, may this power be like a satisfying food. Healing, Roxy said, and immediately the skin on my hands grew back, healing me. Thank you, you did a great job, I said, patting her on the shoulder. She flinched at this and blushed with a smile. Thank you. You never told me you knew how to do magic, and silently she muttered. Sorry, but my mana reserves are very small, so I'm more of a swordsman, I said, shrugging. No problem. In the end, we were victorious, she said with a thumbs up. I looked at the Hydra, and immediately the glass where Zenith was starting to crack. Zenith! Paul shouted and ran toward her. The glass liquefied and exploded, releasing Zenith and letting her fall to the ground. With a precise movement, Paul caught her in the air, and she fell to the ground with a thud. Zenith! Paul shouted as he carried her princess style. He quickly took off his green cape, thus covering his wife's body. We all approached to see her condition. Paul put his ear to Zenith's chest with an anxious face. Then he closed his eyes, letting out a sigh of relief. She's alive, he shouted with joy as he began to cry. We all let out sighs of relief as we watched Paul cry while hugging Zenith. Everything had gone perfectly without the need to sacrifice any human life. I looked around. There was a huge amount of mana-infused crystals in the area, and the ground was littered with the magic stones that formed the creature's scales, as well as a large amount of fallen magic items. They would fetch a good price. Roxy, I called out as I headed to the Hydra corpse. Yes, she responded enthusiastically as she accompanied me. We spent about half an hour collecting what we could, but it was too much stuff for all of us to carry, so we made a new plan to come back here later to take the rest. And so we returned to the surface. Paul dedicated himself to carrying Zenith on the entire return trip, while me and Elinalize faced the monsters. We were all in good spirits, and it was obvious. Paul and Elinalize were telling stories of their old days as the fangs of the Black Wolf on our way back, with Jess and Talhan momentarily stepping in to give more details. In the end, it took us about 10 hours to get back to the surface. When we got back, Lilia started crying when she saw Zenith unconscious, and they took her to her room to wait for her to wake up. I stayed at the bar managing the things we brought with Roxy. Since we got back, she had been stuck next to me. In the end, Elinalize invited us all to drink to celebrate, but Paul refused, so we all went out to drink. It was a nice atmosphere, but I barely drank half a glass of beer. Honestly, I never knew what they think is good about beer. On the other hand, Roxy got drunk and ended up sleeping on my lap. Elinalize looked at me with amusement at this. What's wrong? I have something on my face, I asked. Haha, it's nothing, but it's clear that poor Roxy is in love with you, Elinalize said with a smile, and Talhan nodded as he brought his jar to his mouth. Oh, really? I muttered. Of course. I have enough experience to know that that girl is drooling over you, Elinalize said as she took a swig of beer. I already knew this, but hearing it from Elinalize, who knows this from experience, is something different. And what do you recommend I do? I asked. Are you really asking that? Talk to her. And if you want her, marry her, Jess said, but the idiot was already totally drunk. Elinalize just glared at him until she looked back at me. I think you should wait until we return to the central continent. I heard that Roxy wants to become a teacher there, Alinalize mentioned. So we spent the rest of the night talking and having fun as companions until it was time to return. Alinalize took Roxy, and I returned to my room. Today was a good day. Chapter 63 Empty Shell. Another 3 days passed. Everyone in the group, except Paul, returned to the labyrinth to recover more treasures. Now that the Guardian had been defeated, the amount of monsters in the place decreased considerably. So in less than 6 hours, we entered and left the place. In addition, we took the liberty of starting to destroy the magic trap circles to facilitate our passage. I concentrated on the Hydra scales and the crystals that contained Zenith. I knew that these things could be worth hundreds of gold coins if they were worth it well. I was never someone who went after money, but if it was put in front of you, I would not hesitate to take it. Roxy has always stayed glued to me, always trying to start a conversation with me. Until now, she has told me her story, and we stopped until she reached Roa. Zenith hasn't woken up, which has worried Paul and Lilia, but if he wakes up, it wouldn't make much of a difference. I'm now having breakfast at the inn after having returned from the labyrinth for the 3rd time in a row. This is already worrying me too much. Alinalize, do you know if the person you know is unconscious for so long? Paul asked unsurely while having breakfast with us. I'm not sure. She was trapped there for 5 years. Maybe she'll never wake up, Alinalize murmured. I see, Paul said with resignation. And yes, the aura of joy from the first day of the rescue has now turned to worry when seeing that Zenith doesn't deign to wake up. While we continued having breakfast with that bittersweet atmosphere, Vieira went down to the 1st floor. Captain, Lady Zenith has woken up, she announced, and Paul jumped up from his chair and went up the stairs. Here we go. And yes, my suspicions were right. Despite having arrived a year earlier, Zenith remained in the same vegetative state. Of course, Paul was devastated, and I could hear his crying from downstairs. The already depressed air became miserable, since technically the person known as Zenith Greyrat was nothing more than an empty shell, but she had simply lost her ability to communicate with words. Instead, she was now able to read minds, which makes her a Miko, but I will let them find out eventually. My role here was technically over. Obviously, I would lead them all to Sharia, and from there I would return to the sacred land of the sword. I miss Nina, Ghislaine, and Eris. But there was already the problem of Roxy. I should talk to her and see if she would accept being the 4th. I know she deserves more than that. But even so, if I let her get together with Rudeus, my trip here would be practically for nothing. But if I don't, Lara will never be born and Hidegami will wander free for all eternity. What a shitty situation. I was currently in a bar accompanying Alinalize. Talhand had dragged Roxy to exchange her rewards for money at the market, even though she wanted to come with me. But that gave me time to talk to her. So what's with that long face? She muttered while drinking her 3rd pint of beer. It's about Roxy and what you told me the day we rescued Zenith. I muttered, Have you made any decisions yet? Tell me the details, she said with a mocking smile. No, I'm actually conflicted. You see that I'm actually... So, I spent about half an hour explaining my romantic situation. Alinalize's smile obviously turned into a frown, and she ended up stroking her temples in frustration. So that you're already engaged, and yet you did it with me in the desert? She said, slightly raising her voice. You forced me, and you said it was a curse. I reproached her, crossing my arms. Sigh. Yes, that's what I said. And if we didn't, I would have perished in the desert. Let's forget about that, she said, shaking her hand. Now, the issue is Roxy. If you were an honorable man, you would reject her, but it turns out that you already have 2 girlfriends, right? What difference would it make if you took Roxy? She said, pointing at me with her hand. I would do it if I could, but it would be very different if she wanted to. It could be an insult to her, and she would end up hating me. If that's so, I want to reject her in the nicest way possible. I murmured, I see. And if you say that, why are you talking to me and not to her? Alinalize said, raising an eyebrow. You are her friend. You have known her for years. I would like you to do me that favor. Take her out for a drink and tell her my situation is gossip, I said, shrugging my shoulders. And what do I get in return? She murmured. What? My gratitude? I murmured. Alinalize arched an eyebrow and smiled. Never mind. It's only fair. The poor thing just wants to jump into your arms, but when I tell her you'll have to talk to her directly, Alinalize warned. I understand, I said with a smile. Thus that conversation ended, and she returned to the inn almost at midnight to sleep. Elinalize stayed there to relieve her curse. The next day, Paul gathered everyone together and informed us that we would be leaving the city. But before we did, I explained the route that Elinalize and I followed. I told them that we were going to use a unique method of travel, the teleportation circles. I told them there was no point in hiding it. Paul and his family wouldn't mention it. That fucking Jess already knew, and I didn't care about Talhand and the sisters. Jess is the type to drink a few drinks and spill the beans, Elinalize muttered. Well, I'll make sure not to mention the boss's name, even if that happens, so don't worry, Jess muttered. Paul turned to Lilia. How is Zenith? We'll be traveling through a desert for almost a month. Do you think she can handle it? I'm not sure, but I'll take care of her along the way, she said. I appreciate it, Paul replied with a smile. Lilia looked very serious as she stated her intentions. If there was any problem with Zenith's stamina, we could just slow down our group. If you're worried, let's just buy a wagon, Jess said. You do realize we'll have to leave it at some point? Elinalize pointed out. Who cares? We're drowning in money right now, Jess reproached. We take what we can to Azura to sell, she said, showing a bag full of magic crystals and accessories like pendants and rings. I had my own bag too, so it wasn't much a problem. Plus, we did a thorough sweep of the area at the end, but we never found any clue as to why Zenith ended up there, Jess said, shrugging. Nothing, huh? Well, thanks for looking, Paul said. No, it was nothing, the monkey replied. Gino, could I entrust you and Elinalize with the preparations for our departure? Paul asked. Yes, I replied. It's okay, Elinalize replied. We planned our trip down to the last detail. I knew the route, and everyone present was an experienced traveler, but I didn't want us to lose anyone. So I proceeded with caution. We plotted a route that would allow us to avoid the bandits we had encountered along the way. The road was a bit off course, but that wouldn't be a problem. Paul was worried about Zenith, but that problem was quickly solved. Jess bought a one-man carriage pulled by a beast that looked like an armadillo. It seemed to have been specially designed for traveling through the desert. I quickly named the animal Drew the Goat. Unfortunately, I couldn't take it to the sacred land of the sword, so I resigned myself to selling it at the Sharia. The journey went smoothly. We slipped easily between the bandits. We encountered some monsters along the way, but with our numbers, they did not represent any danger. We had 2 warriors, 2 magicians, a warrior magician, a healer, and 2 swordsmen. There was a clear difference in power between each person, but we were well balanced. Apart from that, there was nothing else to worry about. Now it was time to talk to Roxy. The perfect moment came when we both had to stand night watch. We were both sitting in front of campfire and just watching the fire crackle. But there came a point when Roxy got really close to me. Our shoulders were practically glued together at this point. Hey, Roxy, I muttered, what's wrong, Gino? She replied softly. Shit, here we go. The truth is that I have really enjoyed the days we have spent together. Without your help, I would never have been able to defeat the Hydra, and I consider you a good friend, but I have noticed the way you look at me, and I can't help but wonder that if you liked me. I murmured softly. Roxy shuddered at my words and looked down at the ground as she blushed deeply. Yes, I like you. I like you a lot. I thought I would have a chance, but Elinalize told me everything. And I thought that if you already had 3, it wouldn't affect you having another one, she murmured while crying. I could only stand in shock. She actually agreed. I guessed even with Rudeus, she agreed to be second. But it was cruel, you know? She knew I loved you, and she never said anything to me. Roxy murmured softly. It hurt my heart to see her like that, but I couldn't do anything about it. Roxy, you know where I come from, right? I murmured. From the sword's sanctuary, she muttered, sniffling. Yes, that is a long way, and I will go there to become the sword god. If I do that, I will have a very big responsibility there, I said as I analyzed Roxy's reaction. And Elinalize told me that your dream is to become a teacher, right? In Sharia, right? I don't think being with me would benefit your dream, I said. Roxy blinked several times and started crying again. I could only look away in remorse. I would never be able to force you to leave your dreams behind. For me, I have people waiting for me in the sacred land of the sword. Would you leave all that behind for me? I asked her while looking into her eyes. She had red eyes, and she was breathing heavily as she looked at me. And note, that's my dream, that you have your own dream, don't you? She murmured, clutching his robe. Besides, I don't think your girlfriends will accept me. She laughed miserably, and I could only sigh. I don't think that's the problem, but I don't want to drag you down with me forever. I muttered. Roxy's eyes widened as she looked at me. I want to go with you. She suddenly murmured. What? I said without understanding. You said that if your girlfriends accept me, I can be with you, right? But if that doesn't happen, I will stay in Sharia. She murmured. Wait. I said, getting up from my place. You said a few moments ago that you didn't want to give up on your dream for me. Why did you change your mind so quickly? I said, exasperated. My dream is to get married too. She murmured. And if I had to choose between being a teacher and getting married, I prefer you. I prefer the person I will spend the rest of my life with. She murmured. I could only slap myself in the face at this statement. I'm fucking cooked. Roxy McGurdia, are you sure of what you say? Because if you accept, then you'll be mine forever, I said. She blushed tremendously, but smiled. I wouldn't want anything else, she replied. Okay, I guess this is goodbye for Lara. Chapter 64. Back to Sharia. Our night shift ended, and so I went straight to sleep, but Roxy sneaked into my sleeping bag without saying anything. Hey, Roxy, I muttered. What's wrong? Do you need something? She murmured, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Nothing. Good night. I said while stroking her hair. I couldn't see her expression, but she hugged me tightly. Good night, Dad, I love you, she whispered. Damn. Okay, tomorrow will be another day. That's what I thought when I opened my eyes and was back in a white space. I don't know why, but every time I'm here I become more irritable than usual. I frowned at the faceless man in front of me, but for some reason the guy looked desperate and held his head in his hands as he walked in circles. Now what happens? Did something happen? I murmured. Hidegami didn't answer, but just looked at me silently with his fists clenched. I raised an eyebrow at this as I crossed my arms. Now what happens? Did I do something that you didn't like? I said angrily. You're like a fucking thorn in my side, you know that? Hidegami muttered. The feeling is mutual, I said without interest. Hidegami clicked his tongue as he approached me, trying to intimidate me. I don't know what you did, but stop, he shouted. Do what? I literally did what you asked me to do, you fucking asshole. I said angrily. If I had known, I would have sent someone to kill you, bastard. Hidegami shouted, stamping his foot on the ground. And now you threaten me. You ungrateful piece of shit. And now, what did I do that you didn't like? I shouted. You changed things. Without Rudeus in the equation, that fucking bitch Lara was not supposed to be born. But no, you came and changed the destiny of Roxy McGurdia. Lara will still be born. He shouted angrily. Wait a minute, what you mean is my son with Roxy will still be the chosen one? I muttered. Yes, I order you to kill Roxy McGurdia and now or else. Hidegami shouted, but I ignored his tantrums. A big smile and a sigh of relief formed in my body. What is that? Are you trying to betray me? He shouted. Yes, I will do that. At first, I was undecided since Lara would not be born, but with your information I can now make my move freely, I said with a big smile. I could clearly hear a vein on Hidegami's forehead pop out in rage. You fucking idiot. Don't you dare. If you do it, there won't be a single day that you can rest in peace. He screamed. And if you try to get in my way, your days will start to be numbered, Hidegami, I said with a carefree smile. Hidegami gritted his teeth in anger as he stared at me. I know you're apostles. Not many people are willing to help you, and even less if I eliminate them, I said, scratching my chin. He kept looking at me, but then smiled cynically. Ja, so that's how things are, huh? It's okay. But don't complain when I take everything from you. You fucking bastard. He screamed, and I felt a great force push me back. I woke up suddenly. I opened my eyes, and Roxy's hair was blocking my vision, so I pushed him aside and looked around me. Roxy was sleeping peacefully, using my right arm as a pillow. She looked adorable like that, and it was a shame to wake her up. I also looked around. Paul and Elinalize weren't there, but they were doing their guards. Thank goodness Jess was sleeping next to Talhan, so I still had some time. I looked outside, and it was already dawn, so I slowly got up from my sleeping bag. There were the two aforementioned outside, having breakfast in front of campfire. Good morning, sleepy bird, Elinalize said with a mocking smile, but I could only raise an eyebrow. So you've already settled things with Roxy, huh? I must say that you two looked adorable together. Elinalize continued amused. I agree. I honestly didn't think she'd be able to flirt with you in the labyrinth, Paul said with a sigh. Yes, I agree, but that's how things turned out, I said, sitting next to both of them. It was almost dawn, and it was a little cold, so I stayed near the fire. Oh, was Miss Zenith? I asked. Paul sighed again as he played with his food. There's been no progress of any kind. When we get to Sharia, I will notify her family that we found her, and I will see if someone can fix her condition, but there is not much hope, he murmured. I understand. It's a shame to spend so many years looking for a person who is no longer here, I murmured. Paul grimaced as he threw a log into the fire, stoking it. Also, that I heard you have a son, right, Paul? I asked. Yes, there are actually 3 of them, but we are heading to where the eldest is. Ja, I think if your route is right, we will arrive before my daughters, Paul murmured. I see, I muttered. We stood in silence as we watched the fire crackle. There wasn't much to say anyway. Gina, a sleepy voice came from the tent, and we all turned to look. It was Roxy, totally sleepy. Good morning, she murmured, sitting next to me and resting her head on my shoulder. Elinalize smirked at this, and Paul continued with his meal. You couldn't sleep anymore? I asked. No, I looked for you, but you were gone. So, I went out to look for you, she murmured with her eyes closed. I could see how Elinalize blushed with tenderness, and Paul coughed uncomfortably. Well, I usually get up at this time, sorry, I said, stroking her hair. Can I rest here? She asked, and I nodded. Immediately, Roxy used my legs as pillows, and she fell asleep again. Wow, that girl loves you, Elinalize said, hitting my shoulder lightly. Yeah, I love her too, I said with a smile. Another hour passed until dawn broke and the temperature rose again, so we continued our journey. At this point, we reached the area with the wind wall, which Roxy helped us clear. I also kept an eye on Jess, who was obviously behaving more suspiciously than before. He looked at me and Roxy out of the corner of his eye several times, and I returned his defiant look. I caught the fucking bastard several times trying to poison my or Roxy's food or send us both into traps, but with a good threat, he stopped for the moment. At least I want to make him understand that I won't let him do anything during the return trip. So a whole week passed until we returned to the ruins. I didn't say anything about keeping a secret or anything like that since they would figure it out anyway. Fortunately, Jiruo was able to dig into the ruins, so I decided to take us. Let's see, this trip lasted 64 days in total. For many, it is too long. But for me, I haven't even taken half of my time limit to explore. Also, now that I have formally declared war with Hidegami, I want to meet with Nanahoshi so she can help me locate Orsted. Obviously, I knew this would happen, and I already had a plan to do it. And it's simple. Don't let Orsted kill when you do business with him. We finally reached the teleportation ruins. They are as we had left them, so there should not be any problem. Paul and the others in the group were shocked to learn of the existence of one of these, but I told them to only use them for the emergency of the situation. Lilia was doubtful about all this, but I assured her that there was nothing to worry about. The first group that used the circle were Paul, Lilia, Zenith, Vieira, and Shiera. Obviously, I told them that there was a 10-minute delay after each teleportation. They didn't understand why, but they didn't ask anymore. The next group was Elinalize, Talhand, and Roxy. Jess wanted to go with them, but I stopped him, and at Roxy's bewildered look, I just said, I want to talk to him in private for a few moments, I said, and that was enough for her. I really want to keep an eye on him at all times. Those 10 minutes will be enough for that bastard to do something, and I won't allow it. In the end, him, and Goat Juro were the last to use the circle. We went out, and everyone was waiting for us, and when they saw us, they looked relieved. You took so long, Roxy murmured as she approached me. I already said there would be a delay, didn't I? I said with a smile. We are now 1 day away from Sharia. Elinalize, could you please guide us? I said, count on me, she replied with a smile. We left the ruins, and after a couple of hours in the forest, it was summer, so the air was warm. A day of hiking here is like walking through a park, literally. We used Jiruo so that Zenith could use him as a means of transportation when returning to Sharia. Now we were completely relaxed. Even when crossing the forest, Obviously, Roxy took advantage of this to be by my side the whole time. I feel nostalgic just walking around here, what I have achieved in such a short time. Due to our slow pace, it took us 2 days to reach Sharia, but fortunately we arrived in the morning. Paul and the others would rent an inn, and we also decided who would go to inform Rudeus of our arrival. In the end, Alinalize and Roxy were chosen to go, and for the first time I used my boyfriend status to go with her, and she willingly accepted. Standing in front of Sharia Magic University made Roxy put on a nostalgic smile as she looked at the buildings. I could also see some longing on his face, and I knew what it was. But she looked at me, shook her head, and took my hand tightly. So, after talking to the guards for a few moments, they let the 3 of us through, and now it was time to look for Rudeus. Lise, do you remember the places that this Rudeus guy frequented? I asked. Now that you mention it, I seem to remember that he spent his days in the special library, but that's only for the special students, she said. Special students? Rudy is a special student? Roxy said in shock. Yes, that's why I came to study with him, Alinalize said. All right, then why don't we go to that library and look for that Rudeus? I suggested. Roxy and Alinalize looked at me and nodded. We walked around the place, following Roxy since she was the one who studied here for 7 years. But on the way I stopped dead, a boy entered my vision. White hair, sunglasses, green cape, and white gloves. In his hands he carried a stack of books and had a big smile on his face. As silent Fitz's, I exclaimed in surprise. The girl stopped dead and looked in my direction, bewildered. Gino, do you know that boy? Roxy murmured. And no, I'm sorry. It's just that he's a legend in the Azura Kingdom, and seeing him here is a surprise. Let's continue. I murmured, avoiding Sylphie's gaze. She seemed suspicious, but kept walking. You get now that I see her well. With those clothes, she does look like a boy. I don't blame you, Rudeus. We continued walking until we reached the library. Since we didn't have uniforms, they obviously didn't let us in, so we had to ask someone inside to call Rudeus. Fortunately, the old librarian was kind enough to call him. From inside the library, a younger version of Paul came out. Brown hair, green eyes, gray robe, and a spot under his left eye, as well as a dead fish look. It was Rudeus Greyrat. Chapter 65. The rat Rudeus Greyrat had emerged from the library, wearing his iconic gray robe and ponytail. His gaze first turned to me, and he frowned in confusion. Then he looked down at Roxy, and her eyes widened. Master! He screamed, loudly falling on his back. Roxy also had a look of shock when she saw Rudeus, but it was more to see how much he had grown, although that couldn't stop her from hiding slightly behind me out of fear. Master! What are you doing here? He stuttered, and then his gaze turned to Alinalize. And you, Alinalize, where have you been these 2 months? You left without warning. He complained. Lower your voice, Rudeus. We will explain everything to you, but not here, Roxy said, and Rudeus nodded strongly. We left Sharia's Magic University. Rudeus followed Roxy like a faithful dog. If the guy had a tail, it would probably be wagging like a helicopter. In the end, we decided to go to a bar, without many people to talk to. We sat down and ordered some food. Sorry I asked you, but who are you? Rudeus muttered as he looked at me in bewilderment. He's a man who helped save your mother, so be respectful. Alinalize said. Rudeus looked at me in shock and shrugged. Well, that's true, but whatever. My name is Gino Britzes, I said, extending my hand for a shake. Rudeus blinked several times but responded. Rudeus Greyrat. He murmured. Alinalize, what do you mean he saves Mom? He asked. Well, let me explain it from the beginning. Ahem. Alinalize said. Alinalize spent about 15 minutes explaining the entire story of the journey from when I met her, our traveling duo, our exploration and battle in the labyrinth, until the return trip. I could see that Rudeus was visibly depressed upon learning of Zenith's condition. So, Mom's just an empty shell now, he muttered as he played with his food. We're not sure, but we can't rule it out either, Alinalize murmured. I see. Anyway, thank you all very much for your efforts, he said, bowing in Japanese style. It's the least we could do for you, Rudy, Roxy said with a smile. Rudeus smiled heavily at this and looked back at Alinalize. Very well, please take me to my family, he said, and so we returned to the inn where Paul was staying. I couldn't witness this meeting for obvious reasons, so instead, I went out to eat with Roxy at a restaurant. We had a nice time until it was time to leave. Apparently, the whole group will stay at the same inn for a week until they decide where they will live. I would stay in the same room with Roxy, but first I would have to talk to Rudeus and Nanahoshi about the situation with the pixelated man. But maybe the bastard in white had already gotten ahead of me. It happened when I came back out of the inn. Rudeus had already left about 20 minutes ago. I had no reason to go out, but I did anyway. I walked around Sharia City for about 2 hours until I reached the city limits. And then I felt it. All my senses were saying danger. I held Dragon Phoenix and felt something coming towards me at great speed. A stone bullet. I unsheathed my sword, and using the water god style, I easily repelled it, although there was too much power in an attack that should only be mid-range. Shit, in the distance was Rudeus Greyrat with his staff in his hand and pointing directly at me. The guy looked scared and at the same time very determined. Shit, what nonsense Hidegami put in his head? Have you gone crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? I screamed. Shut up. I won't let you hurt my master or my family. He shouted as he started throwing more stone bullets at me. Shit. I made sure not to split any of them in half and just repelled them while slowly closing the distance between us. We were about 30 meters from each other, but I still moved slowly. Who told you I would hurt your family? Hidegami. I screamed. Rudeus opened his eyes in shock, and I could see that he hesitated for a few moments. I took advantage of this and ran until I was behind him. If I wanted to, I would have killed you. Who told you such lies? I shouted. Rudeus was practically paralyzed, but I could see how he conjured a sonic boom to put distance between us. The guy was thrown a few meters back while making a fireball in his hand. I closed the distance between us again and kicked him, knocking him to his knees. What did Hidegami tell you? I know it was him. He's lying to you. You have to listen to me. I shouted. Rudeus looked at me indecisively, so I had to raise the level. I'll guess. A few weeks ago, that bastard told you that an evil swordsman would come to kill your family after I gained their trust, right? I confronted him. Rudeus avoided my gaze, but frowned and threw a huge water ball at me that I barely dodged. Damn bastard. He's not going to understand this way. That Yami Kadasai, I shouted, swallowing my shame. Rudeus stopped dead in his tracks, and his eyes widened. Why you? He stuttered. Yes, I'm also reincarnated. Soy to Mexico. I screamed. He hesitated for a few seconds, but his hostile aura momentarily disappeared. I don't understand. Why would another reincarnated person try to kill me? He said confused, and I just frowned at this statement. For the last time, I have not come here to kill you or your family. Think about it. I was with your family for more than a month. I could have killed them if I wanted to, just like you. I screamed. I could see that Rudeus had a look of total confusion. Listen, Hidegami is deceiving you. He is afraid of your offspring, I told him. My offspring? What's up with that? He asked confused. Your children or grandchildren will help defeat Hidegami, and that is why he has been manipulating you all these years. I screamed. How do you know that? He asked cautiously. The pixelated bastard told me. I was reincarnated after dying too, and a couple of years ago he appeared in my dreams in the same way. I never paid attention to him, and he threatened to kill my family. That's why I'm here. I want to join forces with you to defeat him. I shouted. Rudeus hesitated for a moment as he looked at me. What did he say about me back then? He murmured. The first thing I remember was that he discovered you on the day of the mana disaster. He made fun of how easy you were to manipulate, how you had single-handedly taken Rugard Superdia out of the demon continent, that with your naivety you changed the destiny of Prince Pak Chiron, which would be important for the future, I murmured. I could see how Rudeus clenched his fists in anger as he listened to me. That bastard Hidegami can see the future, and that's why he knows about your descendants. The only one who can stop him is Orsted, I declared. The mere mention of this name made Rudeus tremble in fear. Orsted, are you sure about that? He muttered in fear. I am. He knows about Nanahoshi too. He told me practically everything about you. I said in a desperate tone. I could see how Rudeus put on a face of disappointment, but then it turned into one of determination. Nanahoshi, Rudeus muttered without understanding. How that's true. He still doesn't know her. She also comes from our world, but she is not a reincarnated person. It was more like a summoning than anything else. She is here at the Sharia Magic University. I said, I see. So what can we do? He asked. First, I need to talk to the person known as Nananoshi Shizuka, the summon one of our world. I said, I need her to contact Orsted for us, and then we will talk to him about allying against Hidegami. I said, associate with him? Really? Rudeus said with a shriek. Yes, it is strictly necessary to do it, I answered seriously. Okay, so it will be tomorrow? He asked. Yes, if you dream of Hidegami again, don't pay attention to anything he says. It will only end in tragedy, I warned. Rudeus shuddered at this, but nodded, and so I returned to the end sleep. I woke up being Roxy's pillow again. She was sleeping peacefully using my chest as a headrest while hugging me tightly. Today, I would have to talk to Nanahoshi about Orsted. I got up, had breakfast, and went out into the street. My destination was Sharia Magic University, and now that I think about it, I didn't set a designated meeting place for me and Rudeus. Well, what does it matter? I arrived at the outskirts of the Sharia Magic University and asked for permission to enter under the pretext of a visit. Although they had clearly seen me yesterday, the guards did not let me pass. It was not until Rudeus intervened that I was able to enter. You came early, he muttered. I always get up at this time. It's nothing new, I told him. There was an awkward aura between the two since yesterday, and it couldn't be helped. Did you research Nanahoshi Shizuka? I asked him. Yes, but I can't find anything. He muttered. I stopped dead in my tracks as I stared at him with narrowed eyes. Shit, you know Silent 7 Star? I asked him. Rudeus just shook his head while shrugging his shoulders. Do you know anyone who can help us with that? I said with exasperation. Yes, Mr. Fitz can help us. Follow me. Rudeus said. So I followed him back to the library where Rudeus entered. It took him about 5 minutes, and he came out again with Sylphie disguised. Gino, meet my senpai Fitz. Fitz, this is Gino. Rudeus introduced us. Nice to meet you, I said. Sylphie looked at me bewildered, but nodded in agreement. You need information about Silent 7 Star, one of the special students. Do you have any ideas? Rudeus asked. 7 Star. I think I've heard something about that. Sylphie muttered as her ears bobbed up and down like Elinali's. Yeah, Princess Ariel tried to recruit her once, but we were rejected. Tihei say that guy is staying in the North Tower, Sylphie said, pointing to one of the 4 tallest towers in the place. Rudeus quickly explained to Sylphie what we needed that information for, and we quickly headed to that tower. The damn thing is about 50 meters long, and it's just shitty stairs. Finally, we reached the highest room in the tower, where a wide wooden door separated us. Rudeus, listen, there will be a person in there who will bring back bad memories. Grab your pants and act like a coward. I told him, and he just nodded resignedly. Knock on the door slowly a total of 3 times. Come in a female voice full of irritation, said from the other side. I opened the door, and the room was full of books, and in the middle of it a black-haired girl was on her knees and writing on the floor. When he turned to look at us, I could see that white mask that gave me chills, but I also saw that Rudeus was scared to death. Oh well, until we meet again, Nanahoshi said. Rudeus screamed in terror and tried to run away, but I stopped him with one arm. The guy squirmed for a few moments, but I looked him in the eyes with anger, and he stopped. You look like an idiot, I muttered disdainfully. Ugh, Rudeus muttered. It was time to talk to Nanahoshi. Chapter 66 Chat with Nanahoshi. What way is this to introduce yourself to someone? Nanahoshi muttered as she approached us. Why you? You were there that day with Orsted. Rudeus stammered in fear. I rather saved your life, Nanahoshi replied. Where is Orsted? Rudeus muttered. I don't know, he's a busy man, she replied unimportantly, and then looked at me. And who are you? She asked. Well, let's see what it was like. What Ashua Gino? I muttered, blushing in embarrassment. Nanahoshi immediately looked at me and quickly took off her mask. His eyes were wide open and his mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. You're also a summoned one? She asked in disbelief. No, I'm reincarnated just like Rudeus, I said, looking at the guy. Nanahoshi looked at him in surprise, and Rudeus nodded in fear. I see, she replied with a smile. She quickly began to write something on a piece of paper, and passed it to me. On the paper were written words in kanji that I obviously didn't understand. "Which of those two are you?" Nanahoshi asked expectantly. "I'm not any of them. Unfortunately, I'm not Japanese, I was Mexican," I replied. Nanahoshi's smile faltered a little, but she shook her head as she looked at me. "And you? Are you also Japanese?" Nanahoshi asked Rudeus while giving him the paper. "Yes, I am, but I'm not any of them either," he muttered. "I see. But how did you know I was also from another world?" she asked. "That's why we're here. We need help from the dragon god Orsted, and you're the only one who can contact him," I explained. "You didn't answer my question," Nanahoshi replied, frowning. "Okay, let me explain," I replied, and so I explained the whole story to Nanahoshi. I see. He did indeed mention a few times about his war against that Hidegami guy," Nanahoshi muttered while scratching her chin. "Yes, and that is why we would like to know if you have any way to contact him. We have already made enemies with Hidegami," I declared. Nanahoshi remained silent for a few moments. "And what do I get in return? You don't expect me to do this as an act of good faith for my fellow worldly companions, do you?" she said, crossing her arms. "What do you want?" Rudeus asked. Nanahoshi looked at him with a raised eyebrow for a few moments and spoke again. "I hate this world. I want to return to mine. One of you two must help me do it," she replied. "And how can we do that?" Rudeus asked. "Help me with the test of these magic circles. I assume that since you are both reincarnated, you two must have mana, right?" Nanahoshi asked, and we both nodded. "And who of you two has the biggest reserves?" she asked. "Hey, well, that many have told me that I have the largest mana pool in the world," Rudeus replied nervously. "I see. In that case, you will help me with my experiments in exchange for me contacting Orsted," she replied. "Thank you very much, Miss Nanahoshi," I replied with a smile. "It's nothing, I just want to go back to my world," she replied, bored. I just smiled and we left. "And now what?" Rudeus asked. Now we had left the tower. He and Nanahoshi had agreed to do the experiments together. So Nanahoshi called Orsted, and furthermore, Nanahoshi said that when she returned to her world, she would leave her investigation to Rudeus, which convinced him. "Just wait, when did he say time?" I muttered. "A month." Rudeus replied nervously. "What's wrong? Are you scared to see Orsted?" I asked. "You don't know what that guy is capable of," Rudeus muttered, looking into my eyes with fear. "That's why I'm calling him first place. Only he has the power to challenge Hidegami," he replied with a smile. "I see," Rudeus muttered, and the conversation ended there. It would be another month before Orsted returned, so I would stay in Sharia to wait for all that time. Since I had nothing else to do, I returned to the inn where everyone was. When I arrived, I saw that Talhand and Sierra were packing suitcases. "It's time for us to leave," Talhand said with disinterest. And yes, it's been a full week since we returned to Sharia, and that gave Paul's group enough time to plan their new goals. Vieira and Sierra would go to Azura with Talhand to sell their magical items that they collected in the labyrinth. Alinalize explicitly said that she would return to live as an adventurer, but promised to visit again from time to time. Paul and his family would stay in Sharia, obviously. I said that I would stay another month in Sharia with Roxy to get to know the city well. And then there was Jess, that the bastard wanted to be the first to leave, but Paul stopped him so the whole group could have a farewell party. I was invited, obviously. There Paul vented, saying that he was indebted to us and that he would always be grateful for our help. A touching moment. The first to leave was Jesse, with the excuse that he had agreed to leave with a caravan to the Northern Territories. Obviously, everyone believed him except me, so I followed him to the outskirts of the city. I walked for about 10 minutes, always about 50 meters away from the monkey. The guy looked nervous and walked quickly through the streets of the city until we reached the city walls. There I started walking faster until I caught up with him. "God, what the fuck?" Jess shouted, startled upon seeing me. "Gino. W, what are you doing here?" he asked nervously. "Where were you going in such a hurry, monkey?" I asked, putting a hand on the hilt of my sword. Jess shuddered in fear as he took a step back. Well, I was going to. "Don't tell me. You were heading to the sacred land of the sword to persuade Gull Farion, right?" I said with a mocking smile. Jess remained silent as he looked away. "I see," I muttered, and the next moment I unsheathed my sword at lightning speed. Jess' head flew off, and his corpse fell with a thud. It's better to kill the bastard now, before he becomes a nuisance. I muttered to myself. I spent around 20 minutes burning his body and left no trace of him. Hidegami's greatest henchman has been eliminated, but there are still too many left. After that, I returned to the inn and had dinner as if nothing had happened. A whole month passed, and Paul settled into a medium-sized house with his family, while Rudeus remained in his dormitories at the university. For my part stayed, renting in the same inn with Roxy. I told her that we would still be here a little longer because I had many pending matters with the people here, and then we would return to the sacred land of the sword. That matter is obviously that I need to talk to Orsted. I can't lie if I say that I'm not nervous. It's obvious. It's that damn Orsted. But Rudeus is not having it better than me. The guy seemed genuinely terrified of Orsted, but it's not something that can be avoided. The guy will continue to be a chicken until he has his character development. But everything changed exactly 30 days. It happened right at 7 in the morning after I finished breakfast with Roxy. Rudeus arrived, and he was visibly nervous. "Rudy? What's wrong?" Roxy asked, bewildered. "Hello, Master. I need to talk to Gino," he murmured. Roxy arched an eyebrow at this, and then looked at me. "It doesn't matter, dear. I'll be back soon," I said. She nodded and kissed me goodbye. So I went out to the street with Rudeus, and we walked through the streets until we reached the Magic University of Sharia. So we went up again to the tower where Nanahoshi was staying, and this would be the second time I would talk to her. After knocking on the door, 3 times I opened it, and there was Nanahoshi having breakfast. They arrived early," she murmured. "I get up early," I said, and Rudeus remained silent. "Is it close yet?" I asked. "Yes, it's close to the abandoned village in the forest to the east," she said. "Very well. Thank you very much. I promise to reward you for this later," I said with a bow. "It doesn't matter. Rudeus has been helping me a lot these days, so that's enough," she muttered. "To guide Orsted to us, Nanahoshi gave me a ring, which is actually a magic item that serves as a sort of locator. So after explaining the situation to Roxy, me and Rudeus headed to a nearby forest. It wasn't as far as the forest where the teleportation ruins were, but it was still a couple of hours away from the city. To the east of Sharia City, there is a small abandoned village that had been swallowed by the forest. About 40 years ago, a magical catastrophe had caused the local forest to rapidly expand. The village had been quickly overrun, forcing its inhabitants to relocate. In the intervening decades, the only inhabitants of this place had been the monsters that roamed the forest and the occasional adventurers who came to marry them. But on that day, however, a man was heading to that village, a man with silver hair and golden eyes who wore a white leather coat. The man observed his surroundings carefully as he approached his destination. He was not riding a horse or carriage. He simply walked, passing through the forest calmly, sometimes his sharp and intense eyes glancing at a compass-like object he carried in his left hand. No monster dared attack him. Many bright eyes watched him from the depths of the forest, but when he came closer, even the fiercest creatures fled like frightened squirrels. "Is this it?" he muttered as he reached the outskirts of the abandoned village his compass was pointing towards. The man stopped and studied it in silence for a moment. Why would he call me to a place like this? Slowly, cautiously, he set foot in the ruined village. Its streets were overgrown with weeds. Soon, the man stopped once more. He had reached the center of the village, where a well was presumably located. The man had 2 men in front of him. One had a look of uncertainty, and the other trembled like a frightened lamb. Orsted recognized them both immediately. They were Rudeus Greyrat and Gino Britz's "Why?" was the first thing that crossed the dragon god's mind. Why were these specific individuals here? Gino Britz's was never supposed to have any interest in going out into the outside world. And although he couldn't say anything about Rudeus Greyrat, he still had no answers for what was happening, so he instinctively stood on guard. The dragon god advanced with a firm step before these 2 individuals. Rudeus Greyrat trembled with fear, a reaction to which he was already accustomed. But what confused him the most was that Gino Britz's looked him directly in the eyes. It was not a simple show of bravery. He looked cautious, but from his behavior and his gaze he looked more expectant than anything else. This only confused him even more. Suddenly Gino Britz's approached him with a firm step, Orsted took a step back while going from a calm position to a combat position to an attack position, staring at Gino. The boy stopped dead and put his hand on his waist. "Wait a minute, Mr. Dragon God. We just came here to talk," Gino said. Orsted couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at this. What would he want to talk to him about? Suddenly, Gino Britzes began to unbuckle something on his waist, and the belt holding his sword was untied and thrown aside. "See? I come in peace. I'm unarmed," he said with a smile that only confused Orsted more, but he followed suit and relaxed his posture. "Don't be angry, but I came to talk to you about a sensitive subject," Gino Britzes said with an awkward smile. "What is it?" Orsted muttered. "I want us to form an alliance to defeat that bastard Hidegami," Gino Britzes said, and Orsted's brow furrowed instinctively. The mere mention of Hidegami was already something to be alarmed about. Hello. Help me by giving me power stones and commenting what you thought of the chapter. Alliance. I want us to form an alliance to defeat that bastard Hidegami, I firmly declared. But Orsted could only frown at the mention of that name. "How do you know that name? Are you one of his apostles?" Orsted said in a hostile tone. Wow. Calm down. We didn't come here to fight. We both hate Hidegami as much as you do, I declared. But Orsted seemed not to hear me. "You lie. You are an apostle of Hidegami," he said as he prepared to attack. "Bastard, wait a moment. I am not from this world. I am reincarnated," I shouted. Orsted stopped dead in his tracks as he looked at me doubtfully. "If you let me explain and promise not to attack us, we could help you defeat that son of a bitch Hidegami," I said loudly. "Why do you want to defeat Hidegami so much?" Orsted asked disdainfully. "The son of a bitch contacted me when I was born and tried to give me advice, but I never listened to him. That made him angry, and then he threatened to kill my family. Plus, he revealed very valuable information to me," I said while staring at Orsted. The man just looked at me with doubt and analyzed me firmly. "So you never trusted him, and that's why he wants to kill your family now," Orsted muttered. "Not only that, do you know Roxy McGurdia?" I asked. "That yes and no," he replied. "Okay, that son of a bitch Hidegami in one of his tantrums revealed to me that my daughter with Roxy McGurdia would become the savior of the world, the chosen one that the sacred beast would have to protect, the one that would help you defeat Hidegami," I said. Orsted looked at me for a few long seconds as he analyzed my words. "So that's how it is," he muttered. "Yes, the stupid dog also knows about your curses, Mr. Orsted," I muttered. Orsted opened his eyes wide as he looked at me and clenched his fists tightly. "I see," he murmured. "I know your mana capacity is not very good, sir. If you let us ally with you, we can help you with minor missions that do not require too much mana," I said. Orsted just stared at me. "Gino Britzes, so that's what motivated you to leave the sacred land of the sword?" Orsted muttered. "Yes, although I always wanted to go out and discover the outside world. I went out to protect my family," I declared. "Very well. And what about Rudeus Greyrat?" he said, pointing at Rudeus. "Oh shit, Dad, I had completely forgotten about the guy. He was also manipulated by Hidegami. He can also be a powerful ally for you, Mr. Orsted," I said. Rudeus, on the other hand, was about 20 meters away from us and totally terrified of Orsted. "Rudeus, come here," I said, and the boy approached us reluctantly. When Rudeus approached Orsted, he glared at him. "Rudeus Greyrat, so you were an apostle of Hidegami," Orsted muttered coldly, and I could swear I heard Rudeus squeal like a small animal. I was naive. The guy introduced himself to me as an assistant, but I never fully trusted him, Rudeus said with drops of sweat falling from his forehead. "Okay, tell me about all the times Hidegami visited you in your dreams, and what he said to you," Orsted commanded, and Rudeus nodded fervently. "And the last time was to warn me that a crazy swordsman would come to kill my family after rescuing them in Rapan." Rudeus finished his explanation. We had already spent half an hour talking here, standing while Rudeus explained his dreams with Hidegami. They were all the same, and as he remembered them, he saved the last one. Besides my account of Hidegami not keeping his promise to tell Rudeus that Fitz was actually Sylphie, though he's not surprised by that fucking bastard. Orsted had remained silent throughout Rudeus' explanations, and seemed thoughtful based on all of this. I see that it seems that Hidegami used you to change the course of history in his favor, Orsted said. Asterisk changed the course of history. Rudeus muttered confusedly. Yes, although I don't trust the words of that son of a bitch Hidegami. It seems that you have a strong destiny, Orsted explained. I'm sorry, but what is that? Rudeus asked while I could only sigh. Sigh, it's hard to explain. If you have a strong destiny, then it means you will have a big impact on the history of the world if you try to change it. Hidegami should have used that to his advantage to tip the scales in his favor. He is certainly a damn bastard. Orsted muttered angrily. I understand, sir. Please let us help you defeat Hidegami. Rudeus declared with a shout. Orsted just raised an eyebrow, and I shrugged. Very well, if that's what you want. Orsted muttered. Yes, sir, please. I replied. Orsted looked shocked at this, but didn't comment further. He then cast some strange kind of spells on us, and gave us bracelets with the dragon god symbol on them. With this, Hidegami will no longer be able to see them, Orsted said. Thank you very much, Mr. Orsted. What will be our first mission? Rudeus said in an uncertain tone. Help Princess Ariel Anemoy Azura become queen, Orsted replied. I immediately set my gaze on Rudeus, and the enthusiasm in him disappeared. I see, he murmured. Yes, normally it would take too much mana and time to pull the strings to make that happen. But don't worry, there's still about 3 years left until that moment arrives, Orsted said, and Rudeus looked visibly relieved. Besides, where did they get that ring? Orsted asked. I borrowed it in advance from Miss Nanahoshi. She is fine and in Sharia Magic University. I said, okay, I have to go for now. Tell me where I can see you both? Orsted asked. You can go to Sharia for me. Rudeus said, I will return to the sacred land of the sword. Could you go there? I muttered. Okay, I'll contact you later if anything comes up. Orsted replied, and then gave us both rings of the same type as Nanahoshi. This is how we will communicate from now on. Is that clear? He asked, and we both nodded fervently. That was how I became an ally of the dragon god. Now it was time to return home. So you're leaving already? Paul muttered. Me and Rudeus had returned from talking with Orsted. My mission here was completed, and now it was time to return to the sacred land of the sword, my home. Yeah, I miss my family, you understand, right? I said, I understand. Anyway, thank you very much for your help. I would never have rescued my wife if it weren't for you, Paul said as he gave me a hand for a shake. I returned the gesture firmly with a smile. You're welcome. It was fun, I said, and so we said goodbye. I had told Rudeus beforehand where I lived in case he needed to contact me for something urgent. And to avoid letters, Orsted gave each of us a kind of small tablet where we could send short and quick messages. This was a big help considering the distance from here to my home is a month on horseback. I'm going to miss you, Master, Rudeus said as he hugged Roxy tightly. GHH. Yeah, me too, Rudy. She muttered in pain. Obviously, Roxy would accompany me, so we want to say goodbye to Rudeus. Honestly, this was what worried me the most. I didn't know if Nina would want to let Roxy stay, but I'll try everything in my power to talk her into it. After a short goodbye, me and Roxy left the city. Obviously, we first picked up Patrick Bateman to take us. After all, it was my father's horse, and he would be angry if I lost it. In addition to that, I advised Roxy to buy lots of clothes for the cold, since it snows all year round in my home. And I just realized that I didn't buy any souvenirs in Begarrett for my family, that although it would save me from having to explain where I got them, so it's okay. And so after almost 4 months abroad, it was time to return home. Another 2 weeks passed. I will summarize them in that we rode all day. We rested to eat and sleep only. Roxy had no complaints about this style of travel, so it was fine. We had arrived at the nearest district. Yohich was the border town with Renoa and the country of the same name. And now that I think about it, I am technically an inhabitant of this country. What should I call myself? Narijan. Nah, never mind. To enter the country, we obviously had to identify ourselves, and that's what we did after handing in our cards, so the guards could analyze our adventure cards, and so we could enter the place. After another 2 weeks of traveling, I was finally able to see the mountain that was my home. Is it there? Roxy murmured. Yes, you knew that since I had never left there. I didn't know it was a mountain, I said with a smile. I sure do. Sometimes it's good to go out and see the world, she replied. With this simple conversation, we continued moving forward. After a couple of hours, we climbed the mountain until we reached the outskirts of the place. The forest was lightly covered in snow, and I could see a cave in the distance. That was where I defeated Galvin many years ago. This is where I believed, where I got my strength. So after half an hour of walking, we arrived at the town. The place was practically the same as I remembered it. Nothing had changed, and that was a relief. So this is it, Roxy muttered from the side as she shrugged and trembled slightly. Almost, this is the town. I live higher up, I said, pointing to the flat top of the mountain. I could see that Roxy was already cold in this place. I, for my part, was already used to this place, so it was the most normal thing for me. We walked for another 20 minutes between the village and the snow. My heart felt at peace. I was at home. We passed by the small dojos. The cries of effort of the children reached my ears and made me nostalgic. They made me remember my own path. So after walking, I saw a small house, and immediately a smile appeared on my face. A wooden house with a front and backyard, my house. Is this your house, Gino? Roxy murmured. Yes, this is my home. I replied with a smile as I led her inside. As usual, the door was closed but unlocked. I went in and knocked. Mom, I'm back, I announced. A loud bang was heard from the kitchen, followed by loud footsteps. My mother came out from there. She looked exactly the same, and as I remembered her, but she had a stunned face as she looked at me. Oh my God, my baby, she screamed as she lunged at me and hugged me tightly. I miss you so much, darling, she said as she cried on my chest and hugged me tightly. I hugged her back. Me too, Mom, I'm back, I said. I was already home. Meeting Mom kept hugging me for a long time while crying on my chest. According to her, she felt very lonely at home because of my absence. On top of all that, she's pregnant again, which means I'll be having a little brother soon. What a thing, huh? So after a few moments, Mom turned her attention from me to Roxy. Gino? And this girl? She asked. Huh, Mom, she's not a girl. She's from the Migger demon race, and she's actually 50 years old, I said nervously. Mom raised an eyebrow at this as her gaze shifted from me to Roxy. I see, okay, but what is she doing here? Mom asked, bewildered. I came to introduce her to Nina and the others, I said, and Roxy nodded nervously. Oh, I see. Well, Nina is where she always is, in the central dojo, and your father is in his house, Mom said with a smile. It's okay, Mom, I said with a smile. After dropping my stuff off at home and changing into my training clothes, Roxy and I headed to the dojo. As always, nothing changed around here. Even though it was summer, there were light mounds of snow, and the air was cool. I say this because of how close Roxy walked next to me. Then we climbed even further up the mountain. It took us about 20 minutes until we saw the central dojo. This is where I trained and became Sword Emperor, I said with a smile as Roxy looked at the building in awe. Amazing, she murmured. We went to the main courtyard of the place. There were a couple of sword saints training, but nothing more. They obviously recognized me instantly and tilted their heads at the sight of me. It seems you are very respected here, Roxy murmured. Yes, after all, only the sword god is stronger than me, I said with a smile, and Roxy looked at me in amazement. We reached the sliding door that separates the inside of the dojo from the outside, and I stood there for a few moments. Roxy, stay behind me at all times, okay? I said, and she nodded. I moved the door, and we entered the central dojo. There were some sword saints training there, and Gulfarion was watching them with boredom. But instantly Gulfarion's eyes fell on me, and a shark-toothed grin formed on his face. Wow, what a surprise, Gino. I wasn't expecting you back so soon, Gull said excitedly, getting up from his cushion. I smiled back at him as I stood up straight. Yes, I made a lot of money in a short time, and now I'm back, I declared. Ja, there's no doubt about that. With your skills, you could surely kill a red WRYM by yourself, Gull said, giving me a pat on the back. Yes, that's true, I replied. Gull's gaze focused on Roxy, and he arched an eyebrow. And who is this girl? He said in confusion. Well, she's my magic teacher. I met her just when I left this place, and we went on adventures, I declared. I see. Nina and Eris are training in the forest. If you're going to say hello to them, Gull said boredly as he lay back down on his pillow. Thank you very much. I'll be back later, I said as I walked back out of the dojo. Hey, Gino, Gull murmured. What's wrong? I said as I stopped and turned to look at him. When you're done with all your romantic encounters, come back and have a duel with me, he said with a predatory look that made Roxy tremble with fear. I see, okay, I said, and so I left the dojo with Roxy. That guy was... Yes, that is the sword god Gulfarion, the sixth world power, I said. Wow, that's amazing. Plus he's kind of scary, Roxy shuddered. Yes, it's not for nothing that he is the leader of our style, I commented. And if you faced him, would you lose? Roxy muttered. Nah, I'd win, I answered him with a confident smile. I walked through the forest, leading Roxy, until we reached the cliff where I used to train. There were Eris and Nina in a sword sparring. Are these your other girlfriends? Roxy muttered uncertainly. Yes. Let's not interrupt them, I replied. At first glance, the skills of both had improved considerably. I didn't know if Eris was still training with Aubert, since the two were fighting using the sword god style. I could also tell that Nina had a slight advantage over Eris in terms of skills, but Eris's insatiable energy was too much for Nina, and in the end the poor girl was sent rolling to the ground after a strong blow to the neck. Clap, clap, clap. I clapped my hands as I approached them, and they both froze in place, staring at me in shock. Good job, both of you. Nina, I've already told you not to let your guard down and use the intimidation techniques I taught you, and you Eris fought. I hadn't finished speaking when a red cannonball crashed into me at the speed of light. Gino, I missed you so much, Eris said, giving me a bear hug that surely broke something inside. Gino, why didn't you tell me before that you had returned? Nina said, hugging me in the same way. I just got here an hour ago, I declared, and they both let go of me. They both had anxious eyes as they took me by both arms. How did your adventure go? Eris asked. I made a lot of money, and I think I was able to spread my name around, I said with a smile. Where did you go? Nina asked. I stayed in the Northern Territories most of the time and spent a month in the city of Sharia, I said. Nina smiled and gave me a deep kiss on the lips. Eris grumbled and kissed me harder, biting my lip. Gino? Who is she? Nina asked, now noticing Roxy. Even though she was by my side the whole time, perhaps the excitement of seeing me blinded them momentarily. Well, you see, I murmured and began to tell the story of how we met. Suffice it to say that the two of them beat me up, and when I was left to die in the forest, they both took Roxy to talk to them. Well, I think I deserve it, I muttered as the light left my eyes. Don't be so exaggerated, a female voice said with the energy I had left. I looked up, and a beastly woman with huge tits was looking at me with a smile. Mommy Ghislaine, I murmured, raising my arms towards her like a baby. I'm not your mom, get up now, she murmured, blushing. Okay, I think that's enough. Oof, I muttered tiredly as I healed my wounds with healing magic. Oh? Who taught you that? Ghislaine asked. The girl I came with, Roxy Magurdia. She taught me various magic, I muttered. I don't mean that. How did you learn it without singing? Ghislaine said as she hugged me tightly. I took the opportunity to caress her buttocks and tits. I discovered it myself. Is it unusual? I mumbled, feigning ignorance. Not so much. Eris's ex-boyfriend could do it too, Ghislaine murmured, and after 1,000 long kisses. Aren't you upset that I brought someone else? I asked. No. In my tribe, it is normal for the strongest to have many women, and I also see that you keep your promise to treat us equally, Ghislaine said with a warm smile. I instinctively smiled at this as I looked at her. But I think Nina and Eris don't think the same, she said, patting me on the back. Sigh, don't even mention it. I thought I was going to die, I complained. Haha, it seems so. Let's go. It's getting dark, Ghislaine murmured as she held my hand. We exited the forest only to find Roxy, Eris, and Nina waiting for me out there, the latter two with jealous frowns and arms crossed. TCH, that damn womanizer, Nina said as she looked away, but I could tell she wasn't really angry, or at least not as much after that beating they gave me. Eris was the same, but she didn't say anything and just looked at me coldly. Roxy stood behind them with an apologetic smile and slumped shoulders. Look at that, seducing another woman when you already have another one. Oh dear, you fell into the clutches of this devourer, Nina said, hugging Roxy. But that wasn't. No buts. Gino was already engaged, and yet he seduced another woman. Eris interrupted her. Hey, you two. I haven't heard the story, but I think we should let Gino give his version, Ghislaine murmured. This is not the time, Ghislaine. Take this poor girl to a bedroom. Eris said. Ghislaine just sighed with resignation, looked at me with sadness, and took Roxy to the central dojo. And after that I was left alone with Eris and Nina. I think they'll beat me up again. They both approached me with angry faces, and I could only lower my head. We know everything, she told us, Nina said. Duh. I didn't answer. Even though you knew you had us, you still had the balls to bring another one, Eris said coldly. I can't deny it, I replied. HMMP, shameless. Eris replied. Sigh, but we know it wasn't your fault in the beginning. Nina said with resignation. I looked at her in shock, but she was still frowning. You saved her from a maze, and because of your charms she fell in love with you. Nina reviewed what happened. But in the end you rejected her, right? Nina asked. Yes, but I already told you no buts. In the end you reciprocated, and now you bring her here like nothing happened. Eris shouted. Duh. I fell silent again as I was scolded. I honestly saw it coming, but I thought it would be with a woman like Ghislaine. Nina murmured. HMMP. Eris grumbled. I still did not respond. You stayed faithful to us for 2 months. That's a new record. Nina said, hitting me on the head. I looked at her, and she still had her arms crossed, but her frown disappeared. But it's natural, right? You saved that girl who accidentally fell in love with you through a selfless act, and now she's here, Nina murmured as she smiled again. I looked at Eris, and she still had her arms crossed, but she was no longer frowning. Instead, her lips were curved into a carrot shape. But I'm glad you didn't bring a girl because of your lust. At least you didn't fuck her before introducing yourself. Nina said with resignation, and Eris just watched me. Yep, that I wanted to stay true to myself in that regard. I said with a self-deprecating smile. Oh, you're really good at that, you know. Eris said sarcastically as she pulled my ear hard. And honestly that you're a pervert. I see why you did that to me. When you turned 5, Nina said with a mocking smile. See, can we not talk about it, please? I mumbled in embarrassment. Yes, I know. She is of a demon race, right? That doesn't change that you are a pervert. Nina said, only with the women I love. I said, and they both blushed deeply. See, if he keeps this up, he'll end up fucking everyone. Eris said embarrassedly. Gino, don't we accept it? But let's be clear. Keep those words in that big head of yours. Nina said, poking my forehead with a finger. If you bring another one, we'll all leave you. Eris finished for Nina, who nodded in turn. I got serious and nodded. Yes, I promise. I won't leave the dojo again for a long time. In fact, I declared. Very well. Then see you tomorrow, Eris said as she returned to the dojo. There I stayed with Nina, awkwardly. Nina, should IT was just to relieve Eris' anger. I know you would never do anything to hurt us, she replied with a smile, and then kissed me deeply. I miss you so much, my love. I want you to keep loving me, Nina whispered. Of course. I will love you and all of you equally. I said seriously. Okay, stud. I'll see you tomorrow at training, she replied, slapping me and walking toward her house. I just stood there processing what happened, and a sigh of relief came out of my mouth. Thank goodness. Sword God, after that confrontation with Eris and Nina, I returned home. Now that I think about it, I hadn't talked to Dad. I guess he must be waiting for me at home. Other than that, I guess everything went well. Nina didn't seem really angry. Ghislaine doesn't care, but the problem is Eris. I guess I'll have to reward her later. I'll look through the magic items I brought to see if she likes anything. Or I can give her the short sword. I returned home with all those thoughts in mind. I'm back, I muttered as I walked in. My parents were at the kitchen table. Dad looked at me and smiled while he was eating dinner. Welcome back, Gino, he said with a small smile. Yeah, I'm glad to be back, I said. Are you going to dinner, dear? Mom asked, and I nodded, sitting at the table. I honestly thought it would take longer. Why did you come back so soon? Dad asked while looking at me with a raised eyebrow. I did a lot of things in a short time and made a lot of money, but that doesn't compare to being at home, and I missed everyone, I said. Mom seemed touched by these words, and my dad nodded with a proud smile. Very well. Then I suppose that tomorrow you will resume your training, right? You may already be a sword emperor, but if you relax you will lose condition, Dad said seriously. Of course, consider that everything is back to normal, I said. With all this said, we had dinner as normal. I won't deny that I missed this. After all, this is my home. It also turned out that Mom got pregnant because she felt lonely. I guess Dad kept her company at night. But a brother, the original Gino, was always an only child if I remember correctly. I guess I'll have to ask Orsted about the case. After dinner, I showed my parents my magic skills, now with the excuse that I learned it on my travels. I took a hot shower and fell into my bed. I don't know why, but my bed had never felt as comfortable as it did now, and I also noticed that my room was emptied. I only had my bed and a wardrobe with less than 10 changes of clothes, although my lifestyle does not demand more, and in fact I will soon live in another house, so there's no problem. I had a restful sleep and woke up before dawn. I took a shower and went out for a jog. The cold air of the place filled my lungs and gave me energy to keep running. I felt like I could run faster. I wouldn't get tired, but it was just a normal jog. After that, I went back home and practiced my swings with Dad. My technique was now perfect and totally refined. I was even able to point out some tiny errors in Dad's posture, although he simply responded by looking at me angrily, so I didn't talk about it anymore. When Mom finished, she made breakfast, and then I took a second bath and went out to the dojo. I carried my 2 swords in case Eris was still angry with me, plus some magical items like rings or jewelry if Nina or Ghislaine wanted to, but I don't think they're the type of women who are interested in that, but it was still worth a try. When I arrived outside the dojo, I found that Isolt, Nina, and Eris were training outside. I honestly forgot Isolt was here. My mistake. Oh, but it's you, Gino. I haven't seen you for a long time. Where have you been? Isolt asked with a smile while looking at me. I simply went to explore the world out of curiosity. Now that curiosity has been satisfied, I'm back to stay, he replied. Huh, I see. A very noble motive, she replied. I turned to look at Eris and Nina with a smile. Nina kissed me good morning, and Eris just waved at me, but looked upset. Eris, I muttered. HMMP. She grumbled, crossing her arms and pouting. I smiled at this. I brought you a gift, Eris, I said, taking out the small sword. She looked at me out of the corner of her eye, but with curiosity, but she reminded herself not to look at me. He took the sword out of its sheath and showed it to her. This sword is a magical object. If you try to cut something soft, it won't work, but it can cut the hardest metal, I said as I put the sword at the level of the veins on my arm and tried to cut. Eris was alarmed at this, as the sword was genuinely sharp, but obviously nothing happened. Do you want Eris? I said with a mocking smile. She kept her arms crossed, but looked at the sword anxiously. Hee hee. I just need one kiss, and she'll be yours, I said. Eris looked at me, and then at the sword. She quickly snatched it from me and gave me a quick kiss on the lips. HMMP. She continued to grumble as she looked at the sword. Thank you, she murmured at the end. It's nothing, I replied. I looked at Nina, and she seemed jealous, so I pulled out a pair of gold rings, which she surprisingly accepted. I also gave one to Isolt as a token of friendship, and since she was basically my teacher in the water god style. And so after this quick persuasion, I entered the dojo where Gulfarion was. The guy looked totally bored as he massaged his temples. Gino, an indifferent voice came out of his mouth. What's wrong? I replied. Have a fight with me, he said, standing up and unsheathing his sword. I nodded and unsheathed the dragon phoenix in the same way. Besides that, I noticed something in Gull's gaze. He looked unsure. Plus, he usually makes the first move, but now it was different. The guy was staring at me while still not moving even a little. This made me nervous. But what does it matter? I crouched slightly as I stood up straight. In a split second, I lunged at Gull, and our swords clashed. Due to the force of my attack, Gull was pushed back significantly and put on a face of uncertainty. This puzzled me just the same. Why did he act like that? Gull crouched down and tried to attack my rib, but I stopped his attack quickly. In that position, his back was exposed. I fired on myself and aimed at his neck. My sword moved at the speed of light and was about to land on his neck, but was stopped by Gull's sword. But it was an unstable block. His sword hit his own neck, trying to stop mine. He was only holding on with one hand while with the other, he kept himself from falling to the ground. He was in a disadvantageous position, so I jumped back slightly to give him time to recover his stance. Don't hesitate, He screamed as he lunged at me and threw a long sword of light at me. Our swords clashed again, but I stood firm in my place. Doubt invaded Gull's face. I could see it clearly. I gave a small jump back and lunged at him again. He tried to go for my legs, but I jumped into the air, hitting him right on his wrist, and consequently causing him to lose his grip on his sword. But his reflexes were something else. The guy grabbed his sword in the air, repositioned himself, and lunged at me again. But his jump was too high. I just had to duck low enough to dodge it. The blow was probably going to my neck. With a smooth movement, I moved my sword from the ground until it hit Gull in an arcing motion. I hit his ribs with all my strength. The force of the impact caused him to lose his momentum, and he was sent flying towards the Sword Saints. I was in shock at the scene. I couldn't process it well. Gull lay on the ground, right where the Sword Saints were training. Everyone looked at me with expressions of total shock and fear. "Oh shit," I muttered to myself as I sheathed my sword. At this point, because of the noise, Nina, Eris, and Iseult came in to see what was happening. It only took one look for them to decipher what happened. Nina had a shocked expression on her face, Eris had a proud face, and Iseult just looked at me with admiration. But I was still in shock, and Gull didn't get up. "Gull, are you okay?" I murmured as I approached him. The guy was panting on the floor. While holding the area where I hit him, I instinctively applied healing magic while he stared at me. I couldn't read his expression. I never seen Gull make a face like that. He looked scared, confused, angry, and resigned, all of that in one expression. Finally, he stood up with some difficulty, looked at me for a few seconds, and then bowed and left the dojo. Oh no! Suddenly, all the Sword Saints bowed before me with their heads bowed. "We welcome the Sword God, Gino Britzes," one of the older Sword Saints shouted, and the other saints raised their swords towards me. My gaze turned to Nina, who was looking out towards where Gull had gone. I immediately left the dojo to look for Gull. I ran quickly and was able to catch up with him almost at the exit of the sacred land of the sword. "Gull, where the hell are you going?" I yelled at him. The guy stopped and looked at me for a few moments and then walked on without saying anything. I could see from his expression that the guy wouldn't listen to me. He wouldn't hear what I had to say. He wouldn't accept it. He's that stubborn. With a defeated expression, I returned to the dojo, where the other Sword Saints were waiting for me. "Welcome back, Lord God of the Sword. What can we do for you?" The same saint old man asked. "Keep training. Nothing happened here," I muttered as I looked at the seat where Gull was less than an hour ago. I left the dojo towards Gull's house, and there I found Nina talking to her mother. "Nina, please wait. This is a misunderstanding. It was never my intention." "I know. My father already sensed that you would defeat him soon," Nina said, interrupting me. I looked at my mother, who had a sad expression but nodded. "Since before you left for the outside world, Gull had strange dreams where you would defeat him. He knew that day was coming. It just came too soon," my aunt murmured. "Duh. I just stayed silent at all this. And now what? What should I do?" I asked. "That is not something we can answer you, Gino. Now you are the Sword God. The central dojo is at your disposal," Nina said with a smile. "But what will happen to Gull?" "He left and left them behind," I said. "Dear, normally in the transitions between sword gods, the predecessor never comes out alive. That's how it was for Gull. He killed his master and became the sword god," my aunt said. "But I didn't kill Gull." I reply, "No, you didn't, but if pride was trampled, he now exiles himself from here. He will never come back," my aunt said as tears pooled on her face. And I, "No problem. I knew this day would come, and I thank you for not killing him. Now my priority is to see that you two get married and give me lots of grandchildren," my aunt said, wiping away her tears. "That will be soon, right?" Nina asked with a smile as she looked at me. "Yes, soon," I answered, and that's how I said goodbye to them. I felt terribly confused, so I went to where Roxy was staying. She was staying in a room next to Ghislaine and Eris, so it was easy to find her. I knocked on the door a couple of times until she opened the door. She was wearing pajamas and her hair was messy. "It's true that it's still morning." "Gino, what's wrong?" she murmured when she saw my expression. I didn't answer him and gave him a long kiss on the lips, closing the door behind me. I need some relief. Chapter 71, The Virgin Magician, plus 18. Attention, this chapter will be more sex than history. You are free not to read it, but at least comment on it and give me power stones. I suddenly entered Roxy's room and closed the door behind me. I kissed Roxy passionately for a long time. She let herself go and started caressing my back. I broke the kiss and looked at Roxy. She was out of breath and totally blushing. "And what was that for?" she asked breathlessly. "I think I just made a mistake and I need relief," I muttered while hugging Roxy tightly. "Oh, and now what happened?" she asked, returning the hug. "I just defeated Gulfarion, and now I am the sword god," I muttered while caressing Roxy's back. She shuddered between surprise and pleasure. "I see. Well, congratulations, but why do you say that was a mistake?" she asked, blushing. "It wasn't supposed to be so soon. Now I have the responsibility of the whole dojo, and it's not even noon," I replied and started to put my hands under her nightgown. Roxy blushed even deeper. So that's the kind of relief you want," she murmured, slightly raising her arms, giving me better access to her body. "Yes, may I said as I reached for her breasts and caressed them gently. She shuddered and let out a sweet moan. "It's okay, do whatever you want with me," she said with a smile. I smiled at this and carried her to her bed, where I laid her down and got on top of her. While I was kissing her, I was unbuttoning her pajamas and caressing her tits. She shuddered again as she looked at me with teary eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked. "And nothing. It's just that, unlike you, I'm totally innocent in these things," she said softly as she opened her legs. "It doesn't matter. I'll be gentle with you and make you see how pleasurable sex is," I whispered in her ear, and Roxy shuddered. She still had her pajamas on, but I could see that her crotch was wet and her feet were shaking. "Can you take it off me?" she asked with an expectant look. "Sure, what do you want me to do?" I whispered to him as I gently removed his pants. Roxy shuddered again as she looked at me. "Well, that's since you are now the god of the sword, I want us to get married and have lots of children," she murmured with a smile. "Okay, your wish is my command, my queen," I said, kissing her. And taking off her panties, I slowly removed her white panties. A thread of love juices came out stuck from her vagina towards her underwear. When I took off my underwear completely, I got between her legs. Roxy looked at me expectantly, with one hand over her mouth and the other clutching the pillow. I decided to play with her a little. I brought my face closer to her vagina and gave it a gentle lick. What are you doing?" she squealed between pleasure and surprise. I didn't answer her and continued to bury my face in her vagina while licking her. Roxy shuddered as her hands squeezed my hair. That place. NNNGH. She moaned, and with her legs, she caught my head. "Keep going. Don't stop," she demanded, so I listened to her. I slowly licked her vagina, putting my tongue between her vaginal walls, giving them an oral massage. It was a little salty and also smelled a little fishy, but that just made me hard. Plus, Roxy was moaning exquisitely, which relaxed me and made me want to please her more. After a while, her vagina was already completely wet, and I began to feel how her vaginal walls began to throb with pleasure. "Gino, my love, I'm coming," she moaned. Her vaginal walls squeezed my tongue. Her legs squeezed my head, and a stream of love juices splashed on my face, followed by a feeling of pride as he glanced at Roxy out of the corner of his eye with a smile. She let out a cry of pleasure and arched her eyebrow. I simply limited myself to receiving her come all over my face. It was not as pleasurable as they say, but I can't do anything else. When her tap ran dry, she fell back onto the bed as she gasped for air. "And more, she murmured. "Right away, darling," I said as I rose from my soft prison. I took a quick look at her vagina, the beautiful pink cavity throbbing slightly as love juices dripped from it. A smile formed on my face. I could also see that her pubic hair was blue. Curious, isn't it? I gave her vagina a quick kiss, which made Roxy shudder again. I got back between his legs and took off my shirt. Roxy saw this and opened her legs wider. I also took off my pants and underwear, relieving my 15 centimeters. Gino Jr., my pre-cum, was coming out of the tip of my little boy, so I was ready too. "Please be gentle," Roxy murmured as she looked at me lustfully. I approached his ear to whisper something. "Relax. I'm going to make you come so much that you'll beg for mercy. I'll show you the pleasures of sex like you never imagined," I whispered to her. Roxy shuddered at this as she nodded fervently. So with this confirmation, I put my penis at the entrance of her vagina while watching her reactions. Tell me if it hurts, okay? I said, and she nodded. I slid the tip of my penis gently into her vagina. Her hymen gave me a slight resistance as she made a slight face of pain. But thanks to the foreplay, I was able to get in easily. A small trickle of blood came out of her vagina while she panted slowly. Does it hurt? I asked her. And note, it doesn't hurt. Move however you want, she said while holding my back with her legs, preventing me from leaving. I smiled at this and began to penetrate her gently. H-A-H-A-A. More, she moaned. I started moving faster. The sound of our limbs colliding it echoed throughout the room, making me more excited. Roxy's love juices acted as a lubricant, and my penis began to enter her vagina more easily. I also started to kiss her neck softly, and with my hands, I caressed her breasts. Roxy kept moaning sensually in my ear, which only made me more excited. It got to the point where she gave me a hickey on the neck and started scratching my back with her nails. I'm gonna come. She moaned sensually, and I instantly felt my crotch getting wet and her vaginal walls squeezing my penis. She arched her back again as she came. She muffled her moan as she kissed me on the lips and dug her nails into my back. It was painful, but between her moans I could hear her mutter something. And more to come inside me, she murmured. I immediately felt Gino Jr. get bigger inside her, which earned me another sensual moan from Roxy. I could see that after having come twice, Roxy's strength began to falter, but I still hadn't come even once. So with this in mind, I started moving faster inside her. See come inside me, she screamed in pleasure. After about 10 minutes of penetrating her without stopping, I finally came inside her. She let out a gasp as my cum filled her vagina. But I was still far from satisfied, so I made her lie down a little and stuck my penis inside her again. The room was filled with the smell of our ejaculations, my semen acting as a lubricant which made Roxy's vagina softer. No, she moaned breathlessly. Shit, she's already tired, but I'm still far from dry. I continue penetrating her for about another 10 minutes until I ejaculates inside her for the second time. That I can't take it anymore, she said breathlessly. At this, I reluctantly pulled my penis out of her vagina while Roxy lay on the bed, gasping for air. From her vagina, a thread of my semen slowly dripped onto the bed, giving me a feeling of power, and after this I lay down next to him while caressing his back. How was I? I asked her in a whisper. I'm the best, she said with a smile. Do you think this is enough? She continued. Enough for what? I asked. So she's pregnant? I mean, those are some nice loads, she said as I lay back on my back and caressed her belly. I hope so. But if not, then we'll just have to keep trying, right? I said with a smile. Roxy blushed again, but nodded with a smile. But then she looked at Gino Jr., who was still erect. I'm sorry for having so little stamina, she said with a sigh. It doesn't matter. I can relieve myself in those cases, I said, stroking his head. Ah, I see, she murmured. Hey, I'm a little sleepy. Do you mind if I go back to sleep? She asked with a yawn. No, it doesn't matter. You can rest. Find me at the Central Dojo when you can, I replied with a smile. Okay, Dad, I love you, she murmured and fell asleep like that. I admired her small figure for a few moments, and a smile formed on my face. This woman was mine, and no one would take her from me, even if it meant fighting a divine entity. I walked out of her room, and there was Ghislaine outside, leaning against her bedroom door with her eyes closed. Ghislaine, darling, were you listening to us? I asked, startled. She was blushing as she looked at me. I can smell that you're not satisfied. Do you want me to help you release the rest? She murmured as she rubbed her crotch. Without thinking, I nodded and walked into Ghislaine's room. She closed the door behind me as I took off my shirt again. No, I'm not in my heat period, so it won't be as enjoyable, but I can still use my tits in my mouth, what do you say? She said as she removed the string covering her nipples. I nodded and quickly took off my pants, sitting on a bed. Ghislaine smiled at this and got on her knees in front of me. You didn't clean it properly, she murmured as she began to lick my penis with her tongue. I shuddered instinctively as she cleaned up the remains of semen on Gino Jr. When my penis was completely clean, Ghislaine used her huge tits, and with them, she swallowed my penis completely. It was a warm sensation and a beautiful sight. The perfect combination. "Okay, you can come whenever you want," she said with a smile as she started to move her tits up and down. It was the first time I had a tit fuck, and what better option than Ghislaine and her huge breasts? Ghislaine looked at me with a smile, while occasionally kissing the tip of my penis and giving me pleasure with her tits. The feeling was so good that in less than a minute I came on her tits. Her whole chest was also splashed with his semen, and Ghislaine looked at me with a big smile. "Did it feel that good?" she asked. "Yes, your tits are always the best." "Thank you, my love," I said with a smile. "Well, thank you very much. In that case, I'm willing to do this whenever you want. You just have to say it," she said with a smile. I gave Ghislaine a long kiss and helped her clean my semen from her body. "Oh, but you're a bottomless pit? You've already come so much and you're still hard," Ghislaine said with a smile. "It doesn't matter, it's bearable now. Let's go outside. I have unfinished business," I said, and I spanked his ass. "Hey, Gino." Ghislaine murmured, "What's wrong?" I replied, "Since you have now returned, I want you to impregnate me during this year's mating season," she said firmly. "I see. It's a promise," I said with a smile. She nodded with a smile, and so we left the room towards the dojo. There were many things to do from now on. Chapter 72, The Monkey and the Wolf, Part 1. Just point of view. I opened my eyes. I stood up, cracked my neck, and checked that my entire body was functioning. There were no strange growths on my skin, and aside from the slight growl of my stomach, I was cool as a cucumber. I got out of my tent and stretched, feeling my back crack as I yawned. I watched the sun rise. The direction of the sun told me which way I was facing. I compared that to my map and the mountain range to confirm my current location. I had also checked it yesterday, before sunset, but things can look different overnight, you know? It's important to check twice or 3 times. It's mostly idiots who don't confirm where they are and end up lost. Today to the west, huh? I muttered to myself as I figured out where I needed to go. No one was around to answer. Last night, Hidegami appeared in my dreams again. He told me to go west after sunrise, stop at the foot of the 3rd tree on Fennel Avenue, get on the 5th carriage that passed by, ride that carriage for a while, then get off in the city I arrived at and spend the night at the New Life Inn. He said that would keep me off Rudeus and Gino's radar. Oh man, that was close, huh? I muttered. Exactly 1 month ago, I was close to death. I had just returned from the Begarit continent with Paul and our group. That guy Gino came as Hidegami's backup plan. But oh, surprise, surprise. It turns out that that boy's destiny was greater than the boss's, and so his offspring with Roxy would be the ones to defeat Hidegami. When Gino found out, he betrayed Hidegami without hesitation, and Hidegami told me to kill him however I could. But the bastard was too cunning. He never ate the food I prepared, and he was always next to Roxy. He never let me act, and I knew I couldn't risk it. But the idiot left me unattended for just a few moments, and that was enough for me to make my move. You see, I quickly went to the Adventurers Guild, and with just 3 gold coins, I convinced an adventurer to impersonate me. With a shape-shifting ring, I gave him the task of leaving the city to meet with a young swordsman, and with the appearance of that adventurer, I was able to leave the city to the south. My surprise was great when I found out that Gino killed the guy without hesitation. He really doesn't beat around the bush, huh? Yeah, leaving that aside. Hidegami's instructions don't make much sense, do they? Now, if you're an average guy, you'd probably start to get suspicious of all that. It's not like Hidegami always tells you the reason why you have to do it. So, somewhere along the way, you end up doing something a little different than what he told you, and bam, you get caught. I've experienced it firsthand in the past. I used to end up in situations like that. That's why nowadays, I followed Hidegami's words to the letter. I realized that that's the right way to live. As for me, Hidegami's words are the law. Yeah, I heard them. Obviously, just because I do what he says doesn't mean everything always turns out perfectly. Sometimes his advice gets me into some pretty sticky situations. In fact, that happens a lot, but you know how I respond to that. Well, come on, think about it. Whether I do what he says or not, sometimes I still end up in shitty situations. Life isn't always rosy, but there's one thing I can say for sure. As long as I obey him, I won't die. How do I know that? I'm so weak that I'm pitiful, but I've overcome some incredibly dangerous situations and lived to tell about it. Listen, I've seen a lot of tough guys much stronger than me make a mistake and die. In fact, it's pathetic. These guys are always bragging that they're the best, but when they're about to die, they start whining. I get it, everyone can be a little pathetic, and that's okay, but the guys who die like that are always the ones who go around bragging that death doesn't scare them. They're all real hero types. Doesn't that make you sick? Listen, people who try to avoid death. That's nature. Our instincts tell us that dying is bad, that it's scary, and don't get me wrong, I'm scared, I don't want to die. As long as Hidegami gives me advice that keeps me alive, I'll follow it. He's the reason I've survived until now. You could say he's my guardian angel, or whatever the evil version of that is. The story of how I got my chance to pay him back for all this begins a few years ago. I was completely drunk in a bar in the Azura Kingdom. As always, when Hidegami spoke to me, he said he had a request. Now, his requests almost never end well. The last time he looked for me, for one, my home was completely wiped off the map. I cried more than I had ever cried in my entire life, and I screamed until I had no voice. This time, I did not doubt that it would be just as bad. He likes to make you think that he's on your side, and then destroy you. When my home was destroyed, he appeared just to laugh at how stupid my face looked. I expected all that, but this time something was different. I hadn't gotten this far in life without knowing how to read people. I could tell that Hidegami was in serious trouble and that he had come looking for my help. That's why I decided to accept. I didn't think it could be an act, but the guy isn't a very good actor. Besides, if he really was in a bind, I wouldn't hesitate to lend him my help. After all, a debt is a debt, and I owed him a big one. Now Hidegami said that Rudeus and Gino had betrayed him. In reality, he had probably appeared to make fun of Rudeus or Gino, and it hadn't turned out the way he planned. Anyway, he said that the two of them were his enemies, that they had allied themselves with the dragon god Orsted, the second of the 7 world powers, someone really impressive. The details don't matter. All he needed to know was that the boss and Gino had allied themselves with this really impressive god, and that now it was a problem for Hidegami. Hidegami can see the future. He can see so far into the future that compared to the demonic eye of premonition, the latter would be blind. You might think that it would be child's play for him to defeat his enemies. But apparently it wasn't that simple. He didn't give me all the details, but he did tell me 2 things. First, he could only see the futures of 3 people at a time. Second, he couldn't see Orsted's future. If Orsted interfered with any of the 3 people whose futures he had already seen, those futures would change. From Hidegami's point of view, if Ortade and only Orsted interfered with their futures, it would be as if absolutely nothing had changed. From his white room, he could see the whole world, but Orsted is a huge hole in his vision. He said that both Rudeus and Gino had inherited a small peculiarity from Orsted, that he had some kind of curse that caused people to fear him and see him as an enemy. No one came to him for help, and he had no allies. But with the boss and Gino as intermediaries, he could suddenly recruit a lot of people to his side. Now then, how do you think it would end for Hidegami? The funny thing about all this is that Hidegami can see his own death. One day, without warning, his vision was reversed. He could only see himself standing helplessly over where Orsted lay, kicking him on the ground. However, now it was Orsted who was laughing and kicking him. Why could he only see that moment? Well, probably because at that moment, both Orsted and Hidegami were in the same place. He saw that through his own eyes, and that meant he could see Orsted too. Listen, I didn't care about the details of how Hidegami's powers work. What mattered was that both Rudeus and Gino were a threat. Hidegami needed to get rid of them both quickly. But no matter what he did, nothing worked. So Hidegami came up with a plan. If 3 apostles weren't enough to defeat Orsted, he would simply get more. We would do the same as those 2. Hidegami could only work with 3 apostles at a time, but as long as he had one of those apostles gathering allies, he would end up with a lot more than 3 followers. A good idea, right? And I had been tasked with gathering those allies. Yes, I wondered why he chose me, but Hidegami's usual way of doing things was that when he was done using someone, he would take away everything they loved and throw anything else away. So maybe I was the only one he had left. Once he finished building our army, he would wait for the perfect moment and then attack at the same time, bye-bye, Rudeus and Gino. And that's how I ended up here, breaking my back to find people to support Hidegami's cause. My deadline was Hidegami's timing. There wasn't much time left, but I wasn't doing too bad, but still finding allies wasn't easy either. That's how we did it. Hidegami would tell me that guy, and then I'd go and find him, talk to him as convincingly as possible, and then tell him to be at the meeting point at the right time. All the guys Hidegami had sent me to see couldn't be weirder. They could handle the job, sure, but they were all a little crazy, or they only seemed to half understand what I was telling them, or they had some weird problems, or I just couldn't understand them at all. Well, that's probably why they just stood there listening to a guy like me. The main problem was that there weren't that many of them, including me. I could count all of us on 2 hands. What they lacked in numbers, they made up for in brawn. From world-famous warriors to guys who would fit right into Millis fables. That's how impressive they were. I tried to suggest that maybe we should just hire a couple hundred regular guys who would work for money or something instead, but that was rejected. Plus, Hidegami was worried about traitors. He wasn't thrilled about allying himself with people whose futures he couldn't see. It was understandable. Hidegami wasn't exactly popular. You didn't have to be a genius to know what would happen if Rudeus or Gino showed up to win people's hearts and minds. The boss may not look like it, but he has something that makes people want to follow him. No matter how far behind you are, he'll wait for you to catch up, and even though he has an insane level of power, he's good with people who don't. That's why we can't rely on numbers alone. Hidegami is right. Also, I'm sorry to say, but I'm not the charismatic type. I can't draw a crowd. Every ally was a potential enemy, so we couldn't have that many. It would also be more likely that we'd end up with idiots who wouldn't follow the plan. That was all you needed to end up losing a battle. With his help, we could find out Rudeus, Orsted, and Gino's weak points. Maybe I'm saying too much, but I recognize that he could probably trust us a little more. You know what I mean? It wouldn't even matter who they were. If we had the numbers on our side, that would really increase our chances. You don't win big without taking some risks. But at the end of the day, he's the boss, and I'm the apostle, and his word is the law, although the boss did scold me a bit this time. Why didn't you kill Gino when you had the chance? You could have poisoned him. That's annoying. Chapter 73, The Monkey and the Wolf Part 2, the thing is, you have to be true to yourself. How do I put it? Well, betraying the boss would be, if you look at it from the right angle, the same as betraying Paul, right? I could never have betrayed Paul, so there was no way I could kill his son, right? Men must have codes, you know? Hidegami didn't believe me, but I know myself. Let's say I would have tried to poison Rudeus or Gino. If it were Rudeus, I would have stopped him immediately out of guilt, and with Gino, the guy would rip my head off before I died. But after Rudeus betrayed Hidegami, guilt wouldn't stop me anymore. Now it was decided, Rudeus Greyrat and Gino Britzes are my enemies. So here I am today, preparing to start another day, to recruit a hidden talent to join the cause. I didn't have any currently, but just one of them was equivalent to an army. I never thought I'd get to meet guys of this caliber, let alone talk to them. As for me, they were legends and way out of my league, but when I started talking to them, it's going to be surprising. Well, it shouldn't have been a surprise. They were all just people, normal people, even if they had some personality issues. Especially the first one, and the one I'm on my way to visit. He's pretty famous. You might even know him, but shit, he really was just another normal person. So here I am, a little while after Hidegami made his request. Before I left, Hidegami had some work for me to do. I took the blade of a demonic sword that was rotting away in the back of a warehouse full of junk in the Azura Kingdom, and then the hilt from a burial mound in the Dragon King Kingdom. Then took them to a blacksmith who specialized in demonic weapons and asked him to forge them. I also got some alcohol, made by a rather cunning tribe on the Demon Continent, and some other knickknacks. For the record, I don't know what these things were. But, well, from what Hidegami told me, and imagining as best I could what was coming, I could see how these things could be useful. As they say, better safe than sorry. After all that, I headed north following Hidegami's orders. Unlike Gino and Rudeus, I didn't have the teleportation relics of the ancient dragon tribe, so I was limited by travel time. But strangely enough, there were some other teleportation circles. I didn't know if Orsted was aware of them or not. There were only a few of them, and they couldn't take you everywhere, but they were useful. If you don't believe me, keep in mind that I did everything mentioned above in just 6 months. Following Hidegami's orders, I headed towards the town of nearest district, my final destination, bought some cold weather gear, and then made my way through the snow that was piling up at my feet. I was heading toward a ravine in the middle of the forest, and the forest was a place of monsters. I would definitely encounter some. A guy like me didn't stand a chance going in alone, with or without weapons to defend myself. But I had a few tricks up my sleeve. Hidegami told me that if I entered the forest at the right time, and then did the right thing at the right time, I could get from A to B without any problems. For example, he said, when you come to a cave that's under a large tormel tree, stop and slowly count to 20 before continuing. I did as he told me, checking under every tormel tree I came across. There was no way I wouldn't see it. If Hidegami said there would be a cave, it would be there. There was no guarantee that it would work, and no explanation as to why I should do it. Without having the slightest idea of what I was doing, I left the place right after carrying out his orders. I'm not an idiot, so I already assumed what it was. I'm an S-rank adventurer. I knew what kind of monster nested in this hole. This was where the snow deer lived. These beasts that look like giant deer lived here all winter. Anyway, that's how it is when you can see the future. Things can be dangerous, but you don't have to worry about death. Nothing unexpected happens. You might end up with some scratches, some bruises, but you always come out alive. So I got out of that forest like that. I found a ravine just outside the forest. A cold wind blew through it. The walls of the cliff were completely covered in ice, pieces of it over the river that flowed over the river at the bottom. BR. I shivered from the cold. The cold was unbearable. I wanted to get out of here as quickly as possible, but I endured that feeling and continued on. I walked for half a day through the frozen ravine until I found a path that led down to the cliff. I followed it down, then continued up the ravine to find him. He was leaning against a huge rock, swinging his sword. A campfire was burning in front of him, where a piece of meat was crackling as it roasted. I didn't need to ask what kind of meat it was. I could see the corpse lying right behind the man and his campfire. A winter dragon, a rank A monster. Technically, they weren't dragons, but still, due to their dragon-like strength, that's where the name came from. It wasn't a kind of monster you would hunt alone, but that guy seems to have defeated this monster on his own. I wasn't surprised. I knew he was the kind of guy who could do it. Gino could take on a hydra by himself, and this guy is weaker than him. He was the former sword god Golfarion, and now we were going to have a talk. A chill ran through me as I got close enough to him. This guy would kill me. He didn't have to warn me. I knew that beyond this point, I would be within range of his sword, and that it was best to be prepared to face the consequences. I felt my face cramping up, but I forced a smile that would hide my fear and radiate confidence. So, with a smile fixed in place, I approached him. It felt wrong for me to be looking down on this guy, but he was sitting down. What was I supposed to do? Yes, he asked. His question was a challenge, but his voice was deadly calm. He wasn't trying to threaten or intimidate me. He was just indifferently asking about my sudden appearance, just like you might ask someone's name. My name is Jess, I replied. I didn't ask your name, he replied. Well, I guess wrong. I wonder how I should start. I had a lot of things to talk to him about. But to start, I decided to just shut my mouth and stay standing there. Guys like this hated charlatans. They had their own method of persuasion. What the fuck is going on here? He complained. The other night, a bastard calling himself Hidegami or whatever appeared in my dreams telling me to help him. He said that if I listened to him, he would make my dreams come true. He told me about this place as proof. When I got there, I found this thing Gull said and pointed with his thumb towards the corpse of the winter dragon behind him. When I was just a kid, I met a winter dragon and barely got out alive, he said. I was going to go back and kill it someday, but along the way I forgot about it. Would you believe? I came here and found it, he continued. Haha, so that's his move. Now, I get it. Hidegami was a pro at this kind of thing, making dreams come true, or something close to it. So I killed him, and now you appeared, someone with a monkey face. Hey, you said your name was Jess, right? Gull asked. Finally, he looked me up and down, and for the first time, I saw his face. He didn't look especially strong. I spent my time reading people, so I could often tell from their faces if they were strong or weak. It's not like I judge how tough they look. It's all in the expression. Strong people usually show it through it. It's something normal for them. They have a clear image of their own capabilities, and they don't hesitate. That means they usually don't put up a facade. This guy wasn't bragging. but he was hesitating. Someone had come and shattered into little pieces what he believed to be true. Now he was tired, out of patience, and at his limit. That was what his face was telling me. I get it, he got his ass kicked, and recently defeated. He was left half dead. This is someone who believed that wasn't possible, or at least he believed he still had a few years left before he got to that point. He had ended up with his world upside down. So now he didn't know what to think. He had come here to lick his wounds after losing all his confidence. The scene of a big, invincible guy desperate after someone beat him up or two is not a sight I'll soon forget. The thing is, just because you feel depressed doesn't mean it's all over, dude. This guy was still a master in his field. I had no doubts that I could use him. Explain yourself, he demanded. So I opened my mouth. I had thought up something like a speech, and that was why I had remained silent until now. First, yes, that's right. I'm here as a delegate of Hidegami. I said a delegate. What? Gull muttered. What? You've never heard the word delegate before, honey. I can't stand ignorant types. Listen, Hidegami will grant you your dreams. In return, he has a tiny favor to ask of you. He's gathering allies. I'm here as what you would call an errand boy. Gathering the group, I said. My dreams, huh? So you and your boss know what my dream is. Gull said, caressing the hilt of his sword. Now that's terrifying. Oh, holy Hidegami, do not abandon me. Even I, your humble servant, would not find it funny to die here. The dragon god Orsted, I said, and it felt like the temperature around us had plummeted, but that told me I hit the mark. You want to defeat the dragon god Orsted. He beat you once a long time ago. So you trained to become the strongest in the world. And after a while you got there, but then you found yourself held back by the restrictions you placed on yourself. No longer able to even go after your target. Your final enemy. Hidegami is also after Orsted, I said. It's just that, well, he doesn't want glory. He just wants him dead by any means necessary. And you are that means, understand? Just that. I'm sorry, friend, but you don't stand a chance on your own. I'll have to invite some more to the party. I continued. I could see doubt creeping into his eyes. He almost had it. So what I'm offering you is the right to challenge Orsted. You could wander aimlessly until the day you die and never meet him. Or he could completely reject your challenge and ignore you. But if you stay with me, I'll make Orsted face you, without the possibility of running away or hiding, I continued. I could see that he started to look away just a little more. Chapter 74, The Monkey and the Wolf, Part 3. Oh shit. Now there was a dangerous glint in his eyes. He still didn't attack me. He used his words instead. That's wrong, he said. Yeah, you're right about that. It's all wrong. Totally wrong. My words were getting to him. You're not worthy? Of course you are. You absolutely deserve it. I mean, come on. Who says you have to be number 2 to earn a chance against number 1? Just because someone else got it. Does that mean you can't face Orsted? Who says that? No one. Now, when you think about it that way, you have more right than anyone. You spent your whole life working for it. I said I saw a shadow in his eyes. He was breaking down. All that was missing was a little push. You must challenge Orsted. Who cares whether you win or lose? You may be weak. Your prime may have passed. Who cares? Hell, maybe this is for the best. You really could be better. Now is when you can shake off those chains. You could go face him with nothing holding you back. I continued. Yeah, sure, maybe you'll be crushed. So what? What are you going to do? Wander aimlessly until you're old and frail and die like a stray dog? Are you really okay with that? You're not lazy, are you? I continued. So what's stopping you? Come on, join me. Then we'll face Orsted. What do you say? I finished, then reached out a hand towards him. He didn't say anything. His eyes were somber, hesitant, and stared straight at me. Oh, I think I overdid it. The best thing was always to just blurt out all the information you had at once and only give the other guy a chance to think something through once you've got him on track. The problem with this kind of approach is that if you talk too much, they don't respond anymore. He was reacting to something I was saying, so I thought I was doing it right. But he wasn't the smart type. It would be unexpected, but this was the kind of risk I had to take. Anyway, you can't force people to think like you by stuffing a bunch of words into their heads. So the best thing was to overwhelm them a bit, set the tone, and let them digest it. I gave him all the facts. He just had to put them together, but something inside him was holding him back. He needed an excuse to take the bait, and then I'd have him in my pocket. That's my approach. In fact, if he was smarter, I think he'd be on board already. Too bad. He didn't speak. He was very quiet. This ravine was the winter dragon's lair. Here no other monster would bother us. There was no wind. I couldn't even hear the sound of the water from that frozen river. Only the sizzling of the roasting meat told me that time was passing. The man wasn't alone in silence. He didn't move a muscle. He was so still that he could have been dead. Silence makes me anxious. When everything is silent, that means I'm alone. I'm not alone at all. All I would need would be a monster from around, and I would be a dead man. I wasn't going to cry, but I wasn't going to fool myself that I could win either. All I could do was, I'm not interested in becoming anyone's pawn. Even if it means rotting here, Gull suddenly said. He didn't take my hand. Even worse, he reached for his sword. I felt cold sweat coming out of my entire body. Every cell was screaming at me to get out of here right now. But my brain resisted that and told me to stay calm. I knew I couldn't escape. This guy could cut me into pieces in the blink of an eye. My corpse would be buried in the snow until spring uncovered it and the bugs came to eat me. But I was in one piece. He wasn't messing with me. If he wanted to kill me, it would all be over in a second. So why? Hey, monkey face. Why are you doing this? Gull muttered. You didn't think that after you came with me and said that shit, I would have just cut your head off and left your pathetic corpse here. Gull whispered with a smile. Yes, I thought about it more than a few times. Every time I approached a deranged stranger, I resisted the urge to scream and used my tongue and every ounce of courage I had to reason with them. What dream is your master granting you, huh? Why are you doing this? Gull asked. Why? I hadn't expected that question, but now that I think about it, it made sense. My actions must be confusing to others. Just so you know, I am a fervent servant of Hito. Don't give me that faith bullshit, he spat. I've come across many devout followers, maniacs like those knightly orders of Millis who would do anything for their precious god. I don't sense that in you. Not one bit, Gull muttered. Everything sank back into silence. My mind began to recall the past, from the moment of my own birth to when I became an adventurer before I met Hidegami. I was born in a small village in the south of the Demon Continent. I was the third of the 5 children of the village. Wasn't much, but we had a better life than the average villager. But back then, I felt quite restricted. You see, my future wife was chosen for me the moment I was born, as was my future job. The job of a village child was to live the life that was meant for him. As long as I did that, I could do anything else. Back then, I thought there were many more things I could do. If only I had the chance to take up a sword or study magic, I would prove it to everyone. I would become someone. Or maybe if I could just be hired into the service of some country. You'd all hear of my heroic deeds. I'd go down in the history books. My father would beat the shit out of me every time I started saying things like that. Know your place was what he liked to say to me. Looking back, I recognize that my father said it because he saw who I really was. My father knew the limits of my potential. Obviously, I didn't. How the hell am I supposed to know my place? I'd never been outside before. So I emigrated from a nest, quit my job, ran away from home, and joined one of the merchant caravans that went to trade with our village. I abandoned my family and my fiancée to flee to the nearest big city. That was where my legend would begin. I was absolutely convinced of that. But reality hit me right away. I was a lost cause every time I used magic or wielded a sword. I couldn't even come close to comparing myself to the average. I guess, leaving aside the battle, I did just as well as anyone else, but I sure didn't stand out in any way. I could barely surpass the average when I tried my hardest, but to master something? Don't make me laugh. The only reason I continue to live was because of the dreams I had every now and then, dreams of Hidegami. And so, I survived. From that day on, young Jess became an apostle of Hidegami. I came out of some really unpleasant situations that I would never have been able to overcome on my own, which made me stand out and be noticed by the really powerful guys. But part of me felt empty. That feeling was stronger after the Black Wolf's fangs separated, and I spent some time wandering alone. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was a fraud, that I had never achieved anything on my own. The adventurous version of me was just a shell of lies and pride. Have you seen how the shit on goldfish hangs off of them as they swim? That was me. All I had were cheap tricks and a quick tongue. Was I living that way? In the end, what did I really want? Who did I want to be? Those feelings had always been lurking deep inside me. You probably won't understand, but in my entire life, I've never been ahead, I said. I've always gotten crumbs. I've been trying to analyze people, lying and flattering, so I could take advantage of other people's influence. I've never achieved anything alone, I continued. That's why, how should I put it? I can't let it end this way, I said, and then closed my mouth. I was surprised at how right those words sounded to me. All this time I thought I was having a good enough life, enjoying it, but that one day I would die in a ditch and that would be it, but deep down I felt differently. You can't, huh? Gull said, moving his hand away from his sword. His eyes were now dull, without that shine from before. That's right, you're exactly right. He said. I had blurted out what came into my head, but thinking about it, what I said fit perfectly with this guy's situation. I can't let it end this way. I couldn't, neither could he. Very well, he said with a wild smile. Then he stretched out his arm and took my still outstretched hand. I'll be your pawn, he said. It all happened so fast that it felt a little disappointing. But what I had just said convinced that guy, this guy, the greatest swordsman in the world, so powerful that all of humanity knew his name. So what do I do now? Do I protect you? He asked to know. I answered. I felt like I was going to smile, but I forced myself to remain serious. Maybe I didn't need to, but it's not good practice to go around smiling at people. It scares them away. That's also bad luck. Write that down. For now, you have to go here, I said, and handed him a map. Once you get there, I'll tell you what comes next. One more thing. If we meet by chance, act like you don't know me. This is all top secret, I warned him. The location of the ambush was already decided. When I wasn't making invitations to guys like this, I was already preparing it. I was being careful, taking my time to strengthen everything. I wasn't going to lose. I understand, he said after taking the map. But one thing, I'm not an actor. If you don't want to be discovered, you better stay out of my way, he said, and started to walk away. It was as if I didn't matter to him at all. I liked that. You could tell that he had lived his whole life dedicating it to his sword, without useless actions or wasted words. When he decided something, he just did it. He wasn't the easiest person to handle, but he was insanely powerful. And now, he was my pawn. I saw his back walk away until he disappeared from sight. Then, giving a sado, I raised my fist in the air. That first guy was the easiest. He was important enough to not need an introduction, and he sure didn't act like he had time for a nobody like me. But in the end, all we had to do was talk. He accepted what I said and joined me of his own free will. Timing probably had something to do with it. After all my planning and worrying, in the end, it was something I hadn't even intended to use as persuasion, which conveniently ended up resonating with him. People will always open up about what's bothering them if someone comes to them with the right words. In the end, that was it. I did it right? At times I got lucky, but still I convinced him. But here's the thing. Oh, holy Hidegami, ever since I talked to that guy, I feel like something's wrong. Maybe we missed something, you know? It's just that I have the feeling that somewhere along the way we're going to fall into a trap. Chapter 75, it was worth it. Winter of the year, K428, for several months now. Great news has been circulating around the world. All of them revolving around the sixth world power, the sword god. And it is that for more than 20 years it was known that Gulfarion was the current god of the sword. But last year, all that changed. It was out of nowhere like the previous successions. But the most important thing was the name Gino Britz's, a completely unknown name. There was no record of him in any type of story or important feat unlike his predecessor. It was searched for in many places, and if it had not been for the water god and the North and Para-Robert Corvette who gave their testimony that it was true, the identity of this Gino Britz's as the new sword god would have been discredited. Gino Britz's name came out of nowhere. Many wandering swordsmen went to challenge him when news of his new position went viral. Many said that he had gained that position due to a treacherous attack. Many speculated that this person had killed Gulfarion while he was asleep. Others speculated that he had poisoned him. But those rumors were quickly denied when the strength of the new swordsman was seen. He was able to defeat sword emperors effortlessly. He even defeated the god of the channel with a single attack. But what stood out most about this new sword god was his age. When he defeated Gulfarion, this young swordsman was barely 14 years old. His talent was said to be the greatest ever seen in a swordsman, a total prodigy in his class. Britzes was also said to have 4 wives, the most famous of which were the sword king Ghislaine and the daughter of the previous sword god, Nina Farayon. Not much was known about the other 2, only that they were of the human and demon races respectively, and that one was a saint-rank swordswoman and the other a king-rank magician. But despite all this, many called him an impostor due to his lack of feats. Some even called him the weakest sword god. But those were just names. Now the young swordsman spends his days in the sacred land of the sword, teaching new talents and sword saints. The little that is known about him before his rise to god rank is that he was seen on the Begarit continent, and together with a group of adventurers, he defeated the teleportation labyrinth and then went to the sacred land of the sword. In addition to all that, Britzes confirmed that his predecessor was still alive, but had gone into self-exile out of shame. Many rumors say that he now wanders the world as a wandering swordsman and working as an adventurer, but none of that has really been confirmed. It is also known that this new god of the sword is a more enlightened man and open to conversations. I don't want those of other sword styles to think that we are impulsive, brainless people, he said when Azuran knights came to visit him. The future of the sword god style seems uncertain with such a young swordsman in charge, but it is only a matter of waiting. Extract from the book Great People of Renown from Yesterday and Today in the World, K4 Vivo K499 edition. I opened my eyes and I was in my room, and by room I mean the one that was Gull Farion's room before. I turned my head and next to me was Nina. Last night we had a good night of passion. I smiled at this, and after petting his head for a moment, I headed out to do my daily workout. I was 15 now. It's the summer of the year K428, but here, it's still cold. After I became a sword god, many swordsmen tried to disown me and tried to challenge me, including my father. But after defeating them all and returning their senses back to their heads, they accepted me as their new sword god midline horizontal ellipsis, well, everyone except for my father. After I defeated him, we had a heated argument. The argument being that he wasn't ready for the position. I agreed, but Gull had left without giving any explanation. Since Gull is Dad's teacher, he made the decision to leave the sacred land of the sword anyway. Tragically, my mother followed him, but we continued to share letters. And from your most recent letter, they settled in the nearest district with my father opening a dojo. It was good, so I could go visit them when I could, but that didn't mean that it didn't hurt. But unfortunately, I have not been able to visit them, and since I took office, wandering. Swordsmen have come to the central dojo almost daily trying to challenge me. But most of them can't even defeat Eris or Nina, so it doesn't matter. But that doesn't mean it's annoying to see unknown men barging into your workplace without warning. But fortunately, he was recognized by Aubert as the god of the sword, and when he returned to Azura, he gave his testimony of it. Rita also returned, and she immediately challenged me again. But fortunately, I was able to defeat her in one hit, and thus my legitimacy increased. Leaving all that aside, when I turned 15, I married all my women's. I decided to do the same strategy as Rudeus in the novel and not put them in a hierarchy based on when they became a couple with me. Another great news is that Roxy and Ghislaine are pregnant, both 7 and 8 months respectively. That's why now I spend most of the nights with Nina and Eris. Both of them also seem to be getting pregnant, but it's too complicated for them. Although I know why. It's simple. They both train too much, overexerting their bodies and killing the fertilized egg in the process. I have already told them about this, and although they have lowered the intensity, it seems that it is still not enough. I have mixed feelings about being a father at this age, but more importantly, I remain overly vigilant about Roxy. If we are lucky, our baby will be the savior of humanity, which Hidegami fears so much. And when it is born, I will have to meet Orsted again. Foot, what a life, huh? I muttered to myself as I stopped jogging. I looked up at the sky, and it was still a little while before dawn, so I decided to go back to the dojo and do some swinging. If I stop training as a gull, I will probably retire very young. When I thought of this, I heard the snow crunching behind me. I turned around quickly, and it was a person in a hood. Another challenger. Shit. I silently looked at the figure approaching me. He had 2 swords at his waist and was advancing at a short pace. I arched an eyebrow at this as I opened my palm to search for my sword. Ah, shit. That's right, I don't carry my sword when I jog. I always wondered how a powerful swordsman would perform without his sword. Would he still have the same speed, or is it all due to his enchanted sword? A raspy male voice came from the masked swordsman's figure. It was dark, so I couldn't see his face. That's a good question, but I guess speed is up to you, I replied, shrugging my shoulders. The hooded man stopped about 5 meters away from me and looked at me in silence. TCH, I hate sarcastic bastards. Besides, you're a child. You expect me to believe that you defeated Gull Farion? The guy said, unsheathing his sword. Believe it or not, that's how it happened. And from what I see, you want me to kill you, eh? I murmured. Ja, don't make me laugh. I studied you for months, and you never use a sword when you try, and for that mistake, I will kill you and become 6th on the list. The man shouted, getting into a combat stance. I could only raise an eyebrow at this. I honestly never noticed anyone spying on me during my training, but it wasn't something to be alarmed about either. Ah, I see. You waited for the perfect moment when I was unarmed and so kill me, eh? How cowardly, honestly. I said with a mocking smile. No one will know, he said as he crouched slightly, ready to attack. I quickly put myself on guard in the same way. The guy lunged at me quickly, probably a sword saint, an average one. With one leap, the hill, the distance between us, threw a long sword of light at me. But for me, everything was going in slow motion. But since I didn't have a sword, I couldn't repel the attack, so I had no choice but to resort to magic. I quickly ducked down, avoiding the attack. The guy fell about 2 meters away from me, clicked his tongue, and ran back towards me. I put a hand on the ground and created a wall of dirt. The guy was visibly surprised, but it cut through the wall like butter. But this gave me enough time to throw a stone bullet at him that hit him right in the left shoulder. Ah, fucker. He screamed, losing his balance. Did you think I would be defenseless? You should be ashamed of yourself. I screamed as I threw another stone bullet at him that he was barely able to repel. Shame. Shame on you. The great sword god using magic to defend himself, the guy said as he got up from the ground. But besides that, the way he repelled my attack was very familiar. The guy used flow. He's also a water saint. This is getting interesting. I see. If you defeat me now, don't you think others like you would challenge you? You know my wife is a sword king, right? What's stopping her from cutting off your head? I asked as I accumulated mana in my hands. I couldn't see the guy's expression, but I bet he was hesitating. I took advantage of this distraction and pushed him away from me with a sonic boom. Aff, damn cheater. I screamed as I was lifted into the air. I put a hand on the ground and conjured a hedgehog. The guy noticed and tried to avoid it by falling right next to it, but fortunately he increased in size and a stone thorn stuck into his already damaged shoulder, completely mutilating his arm on the spot. Arg! The guy screamed in pain as he writhed on the ground. I just watched him in silence as the guy writhed in pain. But something that surprised me is that the guy still got up and took something out of his pocket. You bastard! I will never forgive you! He shouted, throwing a bag to the ground that quickly turned into smoke. It was the same type that Jasi used against the Hydra in Rapan. It was cold and I was sweaty, so I have no patience for this. So with this in mind and with wind magic, I cleared the smoke around me just to show the hooded guy that he was ready to throw a sword at me. I raised an eyebrow at this as I looked at him. HAA. Die! He screamed as he threw a sword at me. It was not an act of desperation. It was a refined movement, a signature technique of the North God style technique. But I just stepped aside and the sword embedded itself in a nearby tree. The guy froze as he looked at me. He had a short sword on his waist, but it apparently broke when he fell into the hedgehog. Was it worth it? I asked as I approached him. The guy froze in fear and started running away from me. But with a quagmire, I made the ground around him turn to mud, and he fell face first onto the ground. Because of his missing arm, the guy had a hard time getting up, and when he did, I simply fired a stone bullet at his head, killing him instantly. I didn't feel anything in particular when killing him. Since I was younger, I had been indifferent to killing this type of people. Since before I was even a sword saint, I hated them, and this one was no exception. I can't tell if he was brave for challenging me, a coward for attacking me unarmed, or an idiot for even doing so. I decided to classify it as all of the above and burn his body on the side of the road to finally return to the dojo and do my swings As if nothing had happened, Chapter 76 New Priorities. Another 2 months have passed. Ghislaine and Roxy gave birth without any complications. Ghislaine's baby was born first, and Roxy's a month later. From Roxy was born a girl with blue hair and brown eyes. At first glance, she looks normal, so I chose to call her Ramara. Roxy liked the name, so it's okay. From Ghislaine was born a boy with cat ears and dark skin. I named him Reynolds. 2 beautiful babies who are my children. Sometimes it is hard to process that I am barely 15 years old, and I'm already the father of 2, and by the attitudes of Eris and Nina in bed, I guess they will soon be 4. Other than that, there has been no news. The number of wandering swordsmen who come to challenge me has decreased considerably in this last month. I guess people have already realized my true abilities, which is good. Even life as a sword god isn't as difficult as I thought. I just have to sit on a cushion and watch the saints train. I guess for many it may sound boring. I can even see why Gully got bored of this life. Honestly, I will get bored too as time goes by, but for now, all that's left is to enjoy it. Nina and Eris spend their days training the water god style with Iseult. Roxy and Ghislaine stay home, taking care of the children. It is worth noting that Ghislaine partially stopped training even before she was pregnant. And now, with Reynolds, she only does morning swings and dedicates the rest of her day to taking care of her son. I suppose she will retire from life as a swordswoman? I hope not, but it is not something that is up to me to decide. And I almost forgot to mention that Eris recently finished her training with Aubert and can now call herself a North Saint. In short, life has been good, very good to me. I know many may take this as a red flag, and that's why I've taken my precautions. When Reynolds was born, I contacted Orsted, but the bastard was on another continent, so I have no choice but to wait until now to be able to talk to him, which is what I'm going to do right now. In the morning, he contacted me about the tablet he gave to me, Rudeus, telling me to meet him on the outskirts of the sacred land of the sword. Obviously, I would have to go alone, unless I want this to turn into a war zone. So with that in mind, I simply got up from my cushion and walked out of the dojo toward my house. Keep training was what I said to the Sword Saints before I left. I left through this part so that Eris wouldn't see that I left, knowing that she would want to come with me. So I took the long way around and entered my house. "Oh dear, are you looking for something?" Ghislaine asked. She was sitting on the couch while breastfeeding Reynolds. She looked relaxed, and that made me happy. "Nothing. I'll just go out for a moment. And Roxy?" I asked. "He's making lunch. Ramara is asleep," she replied. "Thanks, I'll be back for lunch," I said and left the house. And if you're wondering, I've also drunk from Ghislaine's breast and I don't regret it. I left the house through the front door and headed quickly towards the village. Practically the entire place already knew that I was the sword god, and I went out much more often than Gull, so I don't attract much attention. I passed through the village without stopping until I left there and stopped in the forest. I took out my communication ring and sent a signal to tell Orsted my location. I stood there waiting for a few moments until a silver-haired man in a white fur coat appeared from the trees. Orsted's silhouette demanded respect, but this was a meeting between world powers, so he would not falter. Orsted looked at me and walked towards me until he stopped about 2 meters away from me. "I'm here. What do you need?" he asked. "First of all, it's been a long time, Mr. Orsted. This is the second time we've met," I said. "Yes, I usually meet more with Rudeus," he replied. "Okay, well, I want to make a request to you, sir," I said, and Orsted just looked at me with his typical scary face. "What do you need?" "If it is in my power, I can help you," he replied. "My children have just been born, and as I recall, Hidegami mentioned that a woman's fate becomes weak when she is pregnant, right?" I muttered. Orsted's eyebrows twitched slightly, but then he nodded. "Yes, it's true," he said. "Well, my other 2 wives also want to have children with me. The point is, if you could give me something to ensure the safety of my family." I asked. "I see. What you need is a guardian beast. If that's understandable," he muttered to himself. "Very well. Thank you very much. Is there a process for me to get one?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "It's not complicated. You just need a summoning circle. I'll make one for you. Tomorrow we'll meet here again," he said in a monotonous tone. "Very well. And thank you very much for your help, sir," I said, bowing. Orsted nodded in agreement and disappeared back into the forest, so I quickly returned to the central dojo. Fortunately, Neither Eris nor Nina noticed that I left, so I returned to my place as if nothing had happened. Ghislaine, for her part, did not ask where I went, and Roxy was only focused on her food. It was good. The next day I got up before the sun came up, and with the excuse of going for a jog, I went back to the forest where I called Orsted again. As it was night, I made a bonfire with fire magic and created some seats with earth magic so we could talk. Something early in the morning, he said, "Yes, sorry, I usually get up at this time," I replied. "Never mind. Here's what I promised," he said as he reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of paper. "This is it?" I asked, taking the paper. "Yeah, it's simple. Just lay on the ground, pump mana into it while thinking of some strong animal to protect your family, and that's it," Orsted replied, bored. "Okay, thank you very much. If you need me to do any mission for you, now don't hesitate to tell me," I said. "Not at the moment. Rudeus is taking care of that for now," he replied. "Haha, I see. Poor boy, he's taking all the load, haha. Answer me something, Gino Britzes. Is it true what you said that day? Are you reincarnated?" Orsted asked, looking me in the eyes. "Hey, yeah. One day, I died in my world, and in the blink of an eye, I woke up in the body of a baby. This body," I said, touching my chest. "I see, that makes sense. Did you know that your counterpart was also destined to be the sword god?" Orsted asked. "That I see. That's a relief," I replied. "Something like that. But the difference is that it wasn't supposed to be so soon. I always knew that Gino Britzes had immense potential, greater than Millis," Orsted said, "and more than Millis." "Was he a swordsman?" I asked in shock. "Yes. He was the most powerful swordsman in history. His legends are true, but with your current power and age, I don't doubt that you can become stronger than him," Orsted said, and stood up from his seat. I see. "Thanks for telling me," I said, feeling a smile forming on my face. "It doesn't matter. We have company," Orsted said as he looked to the side in the forest. Company?" I muttered, confusedly looking in the same direction as Orsted. Without warning, a long sword of light shot towards Orsted at full speed, but the guy simply blocked it with one hand. The bonfire wasn't big, and the sun hadn't come up yet, so I couldn't see who it was. "It seems that one of your wives found us," Orsted said, and immediately a red blur jumped in front of me, standing between me and Orsted. "Gino Ruin! I'll distract him." It was Eris, and she shouted loudly as she got into an attack position. Orsted just looked at me with a raised eyebrow, not even looking at Eris. "Eris, wait, it's not what you think," I said as I stood in front of her. "It's not what I think. Do you even know who he is? This bastard is the dragon god." Eris screamed as she struggled with me. "Yes, I know who it is. It's an ally," I said as I took his sword away. Eris remained silent as she looked at me, and then looked at Orsted and frowned terribly. "An ally? This monster is your ally?" Eris muttered angrily. Yes, it is. Go back home, and I will explain it to you later," I said, looking in her eyes. Eris looked into my eyes, and then looked at Orsted with obvious resentment. "Okay, but I won't leave. If you have to talk about something, I'll be here with you," she said as she crossed her arms and separated her legs slightly in her typical pose. I looked at Orsted, and he nodded. "It's okay. He'll just help me protect them," I said. "Protect us? I don't need protection," she shouted indignantly. Yes. I'm sorry. If you let me explain everything, you'll understand," I muttered, but that seemed to make her angrier. I could only sigh at this. "Okay, Gino Britzes. I'll see you later. I'll leave you," Orsted said, and without waiting for me to respond, the guy disappeared into the forest. Fucking stupid lizard. He made a tactical retreat. I looked at Eris, and she had tears in her eyes as she looked at me. Dear, I slap." She slapped me hard, leaving a red mark from her hand all over my cheek. "Hey, and why is that?" I couldn't even finish complaining when she kissed me hard. After so much time, she's a bit dumb to kiss. Just imagine that our teeth came together. It's painful. "Why you're an idiot. Why you don't know how scared I was." She screamed and started crying. So I just hugged her to let her vent. I don't blame her. The girl obviously has resentment towards Orsted, and seeing me with him must have unlocked horrible memories in her. So I'll let it slide, just this once. "You are an ally of that monster. Do you even know what it is capable of?" Eris said with evident desperation. Calm down. I'll explain everything, okay?" I murmured and then kissed her softly. Oh, okay, you'll tell me everything, she demanded as she took her sword. So we returned home while I thought about what kind of animal I could summon. Chapter 77, The Sacred Beast. Hi. I would like to know if the story has declined in quality or something like that, since I have seen a considerable drop in views, comments, and Power Stones. Something that didn't happen in Chapter 9. Many will remember what happened there. I returned to the dojo with Eris. She was frowning and her eyes were red from crying, but other than that, we were holding hands on the way back. How did you find me, Eris? You didn't see me leave the dojo, I asked. I just wanted to go see you after I finished training, but you weren't there. Ghislaine told me that you went out, and I asked around the village if they saw you, and then I looked for you in the forest. She said, embarrassed. I see, I muttered. Too much effort put into just finding me. Huh? We continued walking in silence until we reached home again. She entered first, and I began to unfold the paper on the floor. What is that? Roxy asked from the side as she left the house. It's a summoning circle that I got by doing several favors, I answered. A summoning circle? Isn't that something dangerous? She asked, slightly worried. Yes, but do you forget that I am the god of the sword? There is nothing that I cannot cut, I said with a confident smile. Roxy smiled at this as she looked at the summoning circle. And what do you plan to summon, then, Gino? She asked. A protective animal. You'll see, I replied while checking that none of the paper was damaged. At this point, Ghislaine came out with Eris, and they also saw the roll. That a guardian beast? Why would we need that with you here? Ghislaine said in bewilderment. You never know what can happen. Everyone stay calm, I said, and Ghislaine nodded curiously. The only one missing was Nina, since she was still at the dojo. She only returned home during rest hours. Okay, thought it's ready, I muttered to myself as I looked at the circle. I put my hand in the center of the drawing and began to pour mana into it. I already knew what had to be summoned. Leo, the sacred beast, that was my goal. With this in mind, I focused on bringing him here. Come on, think top, but white and big, with great intelligence and raw power. I could feel a slight resistance on the other side, but I applied a little more mana, and eventually the resistance stopped. A wolf, a huge white dog, came out of the summoning circle with a powerful howl. T, the sacred beast? Ghislaine screamed in shock as she approached me. Oh, this is the puppy that me and Rudeus rescued when I was a child. Eris said, excitedly, woof. Leo barked as he looked around. Sacred beast. Please forgive us. We didn't mean to kidnap you, Ghislaine said in panic. Woof. Leo barked and looked at Roxy. She raised an eyebrow in confusion, but the dog came up to her, sniffed her belly, and knelt down. Gee, Gino, what's wrong? Roxy asked nervously. I don't know, dear. What is the do? I mean, the sacred beast said. I asked. Wait, Ghislaine, can you understand the dog barking? Roxy asked in shock. Why, yes, I'm a Dodoldia. It's natural, she murmured after a while. The little dog got up again and started sniffing around until he entered the house. Hey, no dogs allowed in the house, Roxy shouted as she followed Leo. We followed the dog throughout the house until he found a closed room and started scratching the door. What does he want there? Ramara is sleeping there, Roxy grumbled. Woof! Leo barked and looked at Ghislaine. I looked at her, and she was silent for a few moments, and then her eyes widened. A sacred beast? Are you sure? Ghislaine muttered, and the dog barked again. I see that. Please open the door, Roxy. Ghislaine said. Everyone looked puzzled except me. In fact, I was relieved by the way things were going. Roxy opened the door, revealing Ramara's room. My daughter was sleeping peacefully in her crib without any worries. Leo approached the crib, sniffed it lightly, and then laid down in submission. Waff! Leo growled softly. Huh? Hiya, I can't believe it. Are you sure? Ghislaine asked in shock. Woof. Leo responded with another light growl. Ghislaine blinked a few times and then approached Ramara and stroked her hair and then looked at us. It seems that our daughter is the savior of the world, Ghislaine said with a sigh. It seems my little daughter has replaced Lara as the savior of the world, haha. But not everyone was as enthusiastic as I was about this aspect. So Ghislaine spent about half an hour explaining the concept of the Dodoldia race savior. Roxy was the one who looked the most nervous about everything. Eris, on the other hand, looked excited. But in the end, the decision on how to proceed fell to me as the leader of the family. What should we do about this? Ghislaine asked, visibly nervous. It's simple. We will take Ramara to the great forest when she turns 15. For now, the sacred beast will take care of protecting her if that is its duty, as you just said. I declared this seemed to be an answer that satisfied both Roxy and Ghislaine. Eris was just hugging the poor Leo. Eris, leave him. You're hurting him. I said. She grumbled and reluctantly released the dog. Leo shook himself and then looked at me. Very well. Sacred beast, do you promise to not only protect Lara, but also my entire family? I asked while looking into his eyes. Woof, he replied. I looked at Ghislaine for a translation. He says yes. I promise, he replied. Very well, but are you okay with being treated like a normal dog? You will have 3 meals a day, a walk every morning, and a designated place to sleep, but nothing else. Do you accept? I asked. Woof, he barked. He says it's fair, Ghislaine said. Okay, so we have a deal, I said, extending my hand toward the dog. He looked at me for a few seconds, but then extended his paw, and we shook hands. And also, what should I call you? Do you like the name Leo? I asked him. Woof, he barked. He says Leo is fine, Ghislaine replied. I smiled at this as I looked at the dog. Very well, Leo. Welcome to the Brits' family, I said with a smile and patted his head. Leo just accepted my caresses and barked with excitement. It was easy and quick. There weren't too many setbacks. So the days went by. My routine changed slightly. Now, I take Leo for my daily jogs, and he stays with Ramara most of the time, but he also watches over the house. Apparently, it turned out to be a very territorial creature, and I noticed that it marked a perimeter of about 5 km around the house, and that includes the large dojo. Obviously, I warned him beforehand that he could not enter that place, so most of the time he could be seen simply patrolling the surroundings. Since Leo couldn't even tolerate a bird being in the place, this truly reassures me to know that he is truly committed to his role as guardian. So there was nothing to worry about. And although there were no complaints from me, there were from Leo. He complained repeatedly that Eris hugged him too tightly to the point of hurting him, so I limited the contact between the two of them. When Nina came home, she was totally confused as to why there was a dog in the house, but Ghislaine explained everything to her, and she seemed to slightly understand what the kitten explained to her. Although I can know that the words sacred beast and savior of the world are the ones that resonate the most in her head. But they all seem positive about having a pet at home, and that was good. You're lucky to be so cute and huggable, Leo. So several months passed, and we were already in winter again. I realized that Ghislaine, she started training less. Before it was the excuse that she was recovering from her pregnancy. But now it seems that she has lost interest in training too much. I want to dedicate myself to taking care of Reynolds, was what she said. I was conflicted about that, but if that was her decision, I couldn't force her to change it. But I did make her promise me that we would at least have a daily sparring session, so she wouldn't get out of shape. She accepted that, and now we are on it. H.A. She screamed as she lunged at me, and our swords clashed. I blocked her sword effortlessly as Ghislaine stared at me. Come on, you can do better than that, I said. She grumbled as she spun around on her own axis and aimed at my ribs. I stopped the attack again, but Ghislaine changed her strategy. She started running on all fours while carrying her sword in her mouth. She closed the distance between us quickly, jumped, and threw a long sword of light at me. I repelled the attack using flow, and Ghislaine spun in the air, aiming at my shoulder. But I just moved away a little, and she fell to the ground like a cat. She was totally focused on me. I could see it in her eyes. Besides the lust with which she always looks at me, there was a look of a predator stalking her prey. She lunged at me again and threw another long sword of light at me, while she threw herself to the ground and tried to scratch my feet with her claws. With a simple movement, I repelled his attack again and made a gentle jump to avoid his claws. But on top of that, with the blunt side of my sword, I attacked her by the sword, which made her fly through the snow. Even though I think I overdid a bit, Ghislaine quickly got up from the ground. I couldn't help but smile at this, but I noticed that Ghislaine looked tired. Her tail was wagging fiercely due to excitement, but she was sweating quite a bit and breathing heavily. It seems that she has relaxed too much because she became a mother, but that's not bad either. Okay, That's all for today, my love, I said. Ghislaine immediately sat on the ground as she caught her breath. I scanned her expression, but she looked relaxed, rather relieved that it was over. Ghislaine, I'll ask you a question. You don't have as much motivation to train anymore, do you? I muttered. She looked me in the eyes in disbelief for a few seconds, but then sighed and laughed. Haha, I guess so. I want to spend my life enjoying myself and not training. I want to spend my life with you, she murmured. I couldn't help but blush at this and gave him a big kiss on the lips. When we parted our lips, Ghislaine was blushing and breathing heavily again. I suppose you'll retire from the sword, right? I murmured as I caressed his cheek. Partially, she replied as she got up from the ground. I nodded at this, and we headed back home. There was nothing I could do about it, but be there for her. She is my wife, and it is my duty to support her. That day, the Sword King Ghislaine Britzes de Doldia officially retired from his position, leaving Eris Britzes as a substitute. The reason was simply to concentrate on her marital and maternal life. Chapter 78, The Monkey and the Young Dreamer. Jess POV. I was inside a white room. Nothing else was here, just a white floor that had no end. I liked this place. It took me back to those years when I was a nobody, full of great hopes and dreams. Young, inexperienced, dumber than shit. I was born in a small village in the south of the Demon Continent, free as a bird. However, I didn't think the village was good enough for me. I was conceited enough to think I was born for great things, and so I ran away. And in the end, I achieved great things. Nope, not even one. The only skills I got were things anyone could do: cooking, washing, cleaning. Yes, I could draw a map, negotiate, or deactivate a trap. But if you ask me how I compared to a real professional, well, it's best not to think about it. If I wasn't such a coward, maybe I could have even believed in myself. But the fact remained that I couldn't even fight to save my life. My only use was hanging out with strong, amazing guys and covering up their weak points. When I was in this room, the fact that that same idiot me was somehow alive always shocked me. But I wasn't going to let things end this way. I was going to accomplish something important, something that would allow me to look in the mirror. Ah, yes, of course, it can't end this way. I know exactly how you feel, said a strangely blurry figure in a sarcastic manner, Hidegami. It was creepy that your eyes couldn't see him properly, and the way he always appeared when you least expected it, but he was also a strangely calming presence to me. Ever since I was completely bored inside my tiny village, he had appeared in my dreams to give me advice. He was my holy human god. I'm sorry to interrupt when you're wallowing in sentimentality, but it's about time you got down to business, isn't it? Hidegami chided me. You've been slacking off too much ever since you recruited Gulfar Ion, but no matter. From my vantage point, I have to question whether your willingness to die affects the bigger picture. It worries me, Hidegami said. Hey, look who's talking. Who was it that came to me whining and saying, I can't win? Help me? I replied, yes, and that's precisely why I'm being so careful. I'm depending on you, he replied. Huh, and just as you wanted, I'm gathering more and more people to take down Rudeus, Orsted, and Gino. I'm all in, I declared. It's true, your recruitment has been perfect so far, even if it's only because I told you their weak points from their childhoods to their desires, to the perfect time to approach them. Hidegami grumbled. Well, it hurts a little when you say it like that, Dot. But come on, at the end of the day, I'm still the one convincing them. I'd appreciate a little more trust. I said, understandable. I do trust you, but we're running out of time, he replied. I understand that it's important that we do it on the right day, right? I asked, yes, he's Rudeus's weakness, so we have no choice but to use him. I have no doubt that it would work, he replied. Yeah, I don't know. No plan is guaranteed to succeed, you know? I muttered. I'm well aware of that. Ever since Orsted got involved, all my plans have gone wrong. I'm sick of it, Hidegami grumbled as he crossed his arms. Still, I'd rather get as many people as possible, especially the next guy. He's an important one, maybe on the same level as the first one, or even stronger, I guess. Do you think you can pull it off? Hidegami asked as he looked at me. Come on, I could think of some reasons for him to fight, upset him, and then set things up behind the scenes. Before you know it, you've got a reliable ally ready, just like the others, right? I said, fine. I don't know what I'd do without you, Hidegami grumbled. Keep congratulating me like you mean it. Anyway, where am I going tomorrow, and how do I get there? You better have something good prepared. I'm counting on you, I said, unsure. Yeah, of course, tomorrow when you wake up, travel straight west, and then wait in the shade of a rock. You can sleep there if you want, then go straight west once more when the sun sets, and you'll reach a village at dawn. Go to the only tavern in the village if you do. I'm sure you'll find it, sure. My consciousness faded away with Hidegami's words echoing in my ears. My eyes widened. I sat up, cracking my neck and checking that all my parts were working. No tingling in my limbs, no indigestion, no strange weird bumps on my skin. I was hungry, but other than that, as healthy as a lark. I got out of my tent and stretched, feeling my back creak as I yawned as I watched the sunrise. After that, I tried to figure out which direction was in front of me. It was my daily routine, and I couldn't start the day without it. Very well, I muttered. A desert stretched out before me. As far as the eye could see, this was the Greyrat continent, the second most dangerous place in the world after the Demon Continent. This place was flooded with monsters as fierce as any on the Demon Continent, and the environment was merciless. I had been raised in the Demon Continent, and even I found myself thinking the second most dangerous place. Well, I understood the reason. Here, in general, there were fewer monsters, plus the central and northern regions were quite safe. Things like that make you think that Greyrat is not so bad. Let's start with this, I said, packing my things and leaving towards the west. The desert was empty, but that was only on the surface. Beneath the sand lay hordes of worms that could swallow you whole and scorpions with poison in their tails that would slowly melt you into soup. But I had Hidegami's protection. I could go straight to the west without being detected by any monster, and it couldn't be easier. Plus, you can't let your guard down. It's not like I have enough tricks to allow me to relax, I muttered to myself. I have to be really careful. I continued west, never changing course. I had wanted to buy a horse or a camel or something, but apparently that would bring monsters. This time the options were to go on foot or die. I'm dying of thirst, I thought as I took a few sips from my canteen to rehydrate myself. Every now and then I would bring a hand to my forehead and neck to check that there was nothing wrong with me. If I felt too hot, that would be a warning sign, but for now I was fine. Demons are resilient, so even a poor devil like me is a bit more resilient than a human, but only a complete moron would think that's enough to stay alive. Well, I'm here, I muttered. The huge rock appeared before me, pulling me out of my thoughts. It must have been about 20 meters high, so big that you had to twist your neck to get a good look at it. It stuck out of the desert, sans like a thumb. There it was, where I would stop to rest, just like Hidegami said. I sat in the shadow of the huge rock for a while, doing nothing. Young people get impatient at times like this. They feel like they have to be doing something, but sometimes the best thing you can do is do nothing. Only that way you don't waste energy. I wonder what other people did. Did scholars read books? What did I do in the past? Right, I fantasized. All my fantasies were about what kind of adventurer I was going to be. I bet the me from back then would be really happy to hear what I was doing now. Traveling through the desert following the advice of a god. Taking a nap in a safe place surrounded by poisonous plants. Put that way, it sounds pretty cool, don't you think? It could be a good story to tell in a bar. I resumed my journey at sunset and arrived at the village after walking for about 3 hours. Hidegami didn't let me walk while the sun was high, and along the way, I discovered the reason. There was a landmark in the village, a rock that glowed with a bluish-white light, so you could see it from a long distance. It made me wonder if that rock didn't attract monsters to the village. But well, I bet it was an important rock for the locals. The village I arrived at was small. It was nothing more than a couple of buildings together. The houses were a mix of shacks covered in filth and tents scattered here and there. It looked like it was going to disappear at any moment. There was an inn, a tavern, and a store to serve the population. As expected, there were no signs of an adventurer's guild here. These guys were self-sufficient, selling whatever they could grow to the occasional merchant who came by and bought the little they needed. I entered the tavern. It also served the purpose of being the village's dining room. A couple of dark-skinned workers with muscular bodies were drinking and hanging out after finishing the night shift. There were many older people and almost no young people around. Yep, this had to be the famous desert warrior village. When I entered, they all looked at me with the same surprised look. To be fair, I doubted many demons visited these parts. "Welcome, visitor, if that's what I should call you," said a man with a reddish face. "Yep, I'm definitely a visitor," I replied, raising my hands to show them. "You don't look like a merchant," said the man. "Yeah, I'm not. Actually, I'm looking for someone, though he's not from around here." I muttered. The man grunted in response, then nodded in satisfaction. "The person you're looking for is up there," he said, pointing out the window. Rising from the sand was a huge rock, very similar to the one I'd used to rest on, all of it glowing faintly. Perhaps it was because of magic crystals embedded in it. I squinted to get a better look at it, and saw that it had scaffolding and a staircase extending to the top, looking a bit like a combination watchtower and lighthouse. "I see, thanks," I said, tossing him a copper coin for the information. "What's this?" he asked. "For information, you don't do that," I asked. "That information isn't worth a fee," he grumbled. "So think of it as a token of friendship," I said. "Come on, you don't see coins like that every day, do you?" "It's a bronze millis coin," I said with a smile. The man stared at me intently for a few seconds, but in the end, he put the coin in his pocket and then clasped his fists together in gratitude. I bet you're wondering why I chose a millis coin instead of money from this place. The truth is that the teleportation circle that brought me here was in the middle of nowhere, so I didn't have time to change my money. I left the tavern and headed towards the dimly lit rock. The closer I got, the better I could appreciate its colossal size. There was a scaffolding platform and a ladder, but the rock was so big that it wasn't much of comfort. "Hey, do I really have to climb that thing?" I muttered to myself. Contrary to what I had expected, the ladder was sturdy and there was no wind. The only thing that made it difficult was the darkness, but I managed to reach the top without slipping. That flat top of the rock was riddled with daggers and adorned with pieces of red cloth. There were mystical letters written on the surface, much like a magic circle. I looked up. "Well, that's quite a view," I muttered to myself. The sky was filled with stars. The desert shone blue under the bright moonlight, and the stars followed the curve of the sky down to the horizon. "So what are you doing here? You're not here just for the view, right?" I said, turning to another figure further up the rock. He was wrapped in several layers of tattered clothing. To be frank, he looked like a pile of rags, but I was pretty sure he was a person. I'd look like a stupid asshole if he actually ended up being a pile of rags, but so what? I had nothing to lose. "So what if I am?" he replied. It was a young man's voice. "Phew, so he wasn't just a pile of rags." Then I'd say, "I'm surprised an important guy like you came here just to look at the stars." I said, "How about I say that's not the reason I'm here either?" he replied. Then I guess I'd ask, "What are you doing here then?" I replied, "But I could answer you, couldn't I?" He said, "Huh?" I said what the hell was the point of diverting the topic. Still, putting aside his roundabout way of speaking, this had to be the guy I was looking for. "The truth is, I'm looking for the Lord of the Greyrat continent, a behemoth," he said. I got my answer. The Lord was always roaming the continent, so there's no way to know where he'll be, although they say that once every few hundred years he appears near this rock," he said, "and that once every few hundred years is today." I asked. He didn't answer. He just slowly turned around to face me. He was a young man with black hair. The look he gave me told me I was right. "No, it's not like that," he said later. "Well, forget that. It was always just a legend. I don't even know if this Lord really exists," he answered. "Then why are you sitting in a place like this?" I grumbled. "Because it could be today." He replied, "Only the truly obsessive guys talk like that. You see, the Lord passed by here once several hundred years ago, and he hasn't returned since, so it could very well be today. Do you understand? He didn't come yesterday or the day before. Several hundred years later, it could be today, right?" the boy said. "You're not wrong," I said with a smile. His eyes said I was serious. He really believed that tomorrow could be the day that the gentleman would happen to pass by this huge old rock. "What made you want to hunt the Lord down? Did he kill your family or something?" I asked. "In fact, that's exactly it," he replied with a smile. "Liar," I replied. "You call a stranger a liar?" "Ha ha. Well, I guess that was a lie." He laughed. "Then why are you here?" I asked. Have you ever seen someone great and wanted to be even greater?" He replied. "I guess a couple of times," I muttered. "There is a great hero that I want to surpass someday, so that I can become the greatest hero this world has ever known." The boy said with growing excitement. "What?" And hunting the Lord here, in the middle of nowhere, is the ritual that will turn you into this super amazing hero. I asked, no, that's not it. I want to surpass this great hero, right? But the problem is how to surpass him. You understand. He muttered, can't you have a duel with this great hero and defeat him? I said confused, yes, there's logic in that, but that's not the way I want to achieve it. He replied, it isn't. I replied, people can't always remain at their peak. Battles are influenced by one's condition and luck. Winning a battle won't do me any good if people say that I just won by chance, or that I had a stroke of luck, he explained. Good. Personally, I would never dismiss a victory obtained by chance or by a stroke of luck, but the rest of the world isn't that understanding. You only become truly great when people call you great. Not even a second before, he continued. Great. Then how do you make people call you great? I asked. That's easy. You do something that a great person did, right? He muttered. So that's why you're here, to defeat the Lord. I asked, bingo, I'm going to defeat the Lord. The largest behemoth on the Greyrat continent. He said in the past, the great hero he wanted to surpass had also killed one. The story had been passed down through the years and spread throughout all corners of the world. Together with his companions, the hero overcomes adversity, saves the suffering people, and then goes to fight the huge behemoth and emerges victorious, a heroic gesture. This child aspired to do the same. Now, if you wanted to be really picky about it, he's alone. He wasn't overcoming any adversity, and there were no suffering people. He had no good reason to go after the behemoth, unless you take into account wanting to surpass his great hero. Now he was here, waiting for the behemoth with no idea when it might arrive, on a rock in a small village in the middle of nowhere. That's true. It makes sense. Since you want to be a hero, I muttered to tempt this airhead with aspirations of being a hero. All I needed were words. Did he want to be the protagonist of a historical feat? Impressive. I would play the wise man of history. Very well. Now I will tell you the reason why I am here, I said. Oh, were you here by any chance? He asked. Didn't it seem strange to you? I am not a merchant, and I don't have a group. What would a useless adventurer like me do in a place like this? I muttered, so the reason why you are here is... He muttered while looking at me. In my best prophetic voice, I intoned, set out at dawn with your back to the sun, and walk for half a day from there. An oppressive silence settled over us. The boy's eyes were shining with obvious interest in my sudden prophecy. Instead of answering, he turned around, placed a hand on the rock, and stared at me. Even showing a smile, if you win, I added, come back here. I'll tell you something even better. Then I turned around to leave. Wait, what does that mean? He said, trying to stop me. I didn't turn around or answer him. I couldn't get out of character. It was time to make a quick retreat. Oops, that's right, we're on a giant rock. Shit, I couldn't just jump from here. I grabbed onto the ladder and started to go down. The boy didn't go after me, but as I descended, I caught him looking at me. There was something in his gaze that made my hair stand on end. My performance had been a little difficult at the end, but that was okay. I assumed it was good enough. Chapter 79, The Monkey and the Younger Dreamer Part 2. I woke up the next morning to a loud bang. I jumped up, ran out of my tent, and looked around. Once I confirmed that there was no imminent danger, I began to perform my routine check. My stomach hurt a little. Maybe the cold of the night had affected me, or maybe the local food didn't agree with me. I locked myself in the bathroom for almost an hour, and then headed out in search of the source of the noise. There was no reason to rush. I knew what was about to happen, just as I knew it was happening right now. I yawned as I walked towards the sound. I found a crowd at the entrance of the village. The old warriors were armed. The children looked anxious, and they all looked towards the distant horizon. I pushed my way through the crowd, muttering, "Excuse me, I'm just passing by," until I came to a spot where I could see where the sound was coming from. The scene in front of me could have been taken straight out of a myth. First, there was a massive beast. It was the strangest thing I had ever seen, and it had way too many legs coming out of its body. Even at this distance, it was colossal. Too big for me to even imagine its actual size. It had to be at least 500 meters from something. It was a behemoth, and it was writhing in agony. It was writhing and lashing out, sending up considerable waves of sand every time it moved. The only reason we could still see it with all that sand in the air was because of how damn huge it was. If you saw a behemoth circling around like this one was you'd assume it was swatting a fly. This was different. The behemoth was covered in blood. And what's more, something was running across its back. Every time it moved, a new huge wound appeared on the beast's massive back, dripping blood. Someone was fighting this giant beast. "Mommy," whispered a frightened child, clinging to his mother. The old warriors barely seemed to be breathing as they watched the battle. The fight went on for a while. The writhing beast didn't make a sound. It just kept attacking. Everyone could see the desperation in its movements. It was fighting for its life. The battle ended just after noon. As the sun began to make its way towards the horizon, the behemoth's twitching became more lethargic as it neared its death. Even as it lay distraught, it continued to writhe where it lay, refusing to give up. Its resistance didn't last long. Suddenly it stopped struggling, stood up, and walked slowly, as if trying to get away. It was too late for that, but I guess the behemoth hadn't noticed that. In the end, the behemoth stretched out completely, stood up on all fours, and then let out a huge breath, and all the strength left its body. It fell back as if to sit down, and then stopped moving completely. The moment it fell, all the warriors clasped their fists and knelt, lowering their heads towards the dead behemoth. I didn't follow suit, but just stood there feeling a little awkward, so I backed away to the back of the group. The warriors remained in place, as if they were waiting for something. Eventually the sand cleared, as the behemoth's corpse came into view. So did a figure approaching from the horizon, wearing layer upon layer of rags and carrying a large sword. "A hero," someone said, one after another. Other voices repeated the same word, clamoring for their attention. "Hero, hero, hero." That's right. In this village they would revere as a hero anyone who killed a behemoth, as the strongest of all warriors, just like the hero of the past who took down an out-of-control behemoth and saved his village from ruin. The warriors of the village stood up and prepared to welcome him. The behemoth wasn't threatening the village or anything this time, but no one cared about that. As for the warriors, they would treat as a hero any warrior who could defeat a behemoth. However, when the figure came to us, he ignored the waiting warriors, stepped through them, and went straight to me. "That wasn't the Lord," he said. "No." I asked. "No, the Lord is much bigger." He replied, "That's creepy to think about. So that was a dwarf?" My sense of perspective is very confused. He was right. That wasn't the Lord. When this guy fought the Lord, or so I heard, the battle would last 10 days, with our hero walking across the boundary between life and death. "Still, thank you. Your advice allowed me to kill a behemoth," he said. "You're welcome." I replied. "Now, what was the even better story you had for me?" he said, his gaze intensifying. "Yeah, about that. You want to be a hero, right, kid? Do you want to be even bigger than this other great hero?" I asked. "I don't want to. I'm going to be," he said. "My goodness. Don't you think you're doing everything wrong?" I said, "What do you mean, everything wrong?" He muttered. "You see, kid, right now you're copying the things this great hero did, right? Killing dragons, killing behemoths, and stuff." I explained, "Yeah, if I can't catch up to what he did, no one will bother talking about me." He replied, "Listen, if you think about it, you're not going to become a hero like that." I said, "Well, I guess not." He muttered again, looking down. He had defeated a behemoth, and within this village, anyone who defeated a behemoth was considered and revered as a hero, but the village was hardly in danger, and the behemoth hadn't done anything to hurt them. All the poor beast had done was get killed. It was hard to value the fact that he hunted monsters for pleasure. That wasn't heroic. That's why I was going to show him the way to become a true hero. "Have you heard of the Super Tribe?" I asked. "Yeah, it's a race of devils, right? They say that during the Laplace War, the Superds killed both friends and enemies," he said. "Some survived," I said. "Where?" he demanded. "Control yourself a bit, buddy. Let me finish. You see, there's some guys out there who are even worse than the Superds," I said. "Someone worse?" he asked. "Of course, and one of these guys is like the root of all evil in the world, you know? Although I recognize that you'll have to hear his name first," I said. "The second among the 7 world powers, the dragon god Orsted and the most recent sword god," I said. That caught his attention. To give myself an air of importance, I spread my arms and tilted my head looking at him. "I suppose you've heard of him, right?" I asked. I knew everything, what the boy was fighting for, who he was trying to surpass, and what that someone did, and what he couldn't do. With that, it was easy to provoke him. He, along with the sword god, turned the super tribe into his followers, and now they're granting them their protection. I said the dragon god is not evil. He is one of the heroes who defeated the demon god Laplace. Rather, he and the super tribe should be enemies, and Gulfarion only remains in the sacred land of the sword. He said, "You were talking about the dragon god from many generations ago, right? Time changes and people become stupid, right? Besides, Gulfarion is no longer the sword god since a year ago." I said, "I see. So that happened," he muttered. "But that's where you're different. You're trying to surpass the previous generations." "I think that part of you is admirable," I said. The boy had gone completely silent. Despite being a talkative guy, he was now silent. That was a clear sign that he had understood what I had said, and that he was seriously considering it. "You can kill the last of the super tribe and defeat Orsted and the new sword god," I continued. "After that, you'll be a hero for all eternity. Not to mention that you'll also be second among the 7 world powers," I said. There was no response. But being great doesn't make you invincible and irreplaceable. Everyone who got a heroic story written about them had someone they were never able to beat. Do you know why? Because they never had the chance, I said in a solemn tone. The boy's eyes opened wide. "You now have the chance to be recognized. More than anyone else in history, you may never get it again." I warned. The boy's mouth was tightly shut. He was staring at me intensely. "Impossible. For many years, no one has known the whereabouts of the technique god, or the dragon god, or the demon god, or the fighting god. No one knows where Orsted is," he said. "True, but I knew exactly where the behemoth was." I said, "It wasn't the Sir." He grumbled, "Hey, what do you want from me?" "The Sir isn't coming here for another 80 years. I said, "Really? Thanks for telling me. Then I'll be back in another 80 years. He said, "Well, 80 years in the future is still 80 years that don't want to test your skills against Orsted. He's certified as the strongest in the world, much stronger than the god of techniques, if that guy is still alive. He's been crushing the competition since the Laplace War, and you have the chance to challenge him." I said. He stared at me. There's no way this guy would have ever paid attention to me if I wasn't working for Hidegami. We could have passed each other at the Adventurers Guild, and he would have ignored me like you would a bush. "Okay, so where's Orsted?" he asked. "I'll tell you, but there's one condition." I said. "I accept," he replied. "Hey, wait. I haven't said what it is yet, have I?" "Don't be so hasty," I said. "Ain't nobody like you would never give anything without first setting conditions for it." He said, "You're not wrong about that." I admitted I was on top of the world. This guy I had admired since I was an adventurer was talking to me as an equal. "It's nothing too difficult. There are 2 things for now. You have to go to this place," I said, and handed him a map. "And once you get there, I'll tell you what you should do next. One more thing. If we ever meet, act like you don't know me. This is all top secret," I said. "As for the second thing, there's someone my employer wants dead, a follower of Orsted who isn't part of the super tribe. He'll definitely try to stop you if you get close to Orsted. So basically, I want you to take him out on the way." I said. "Your employer?" he asked. "Haven't you dreamed about him? This really mysterious guy who gives you advice." "Yeah, I think I did have a dream like that a long time ago." "Do you follow his advice?" he asked. "Well, yes." I replied. "Well, what do you decide?" "I want a yes or a no." I said, "Obviously the yes." He said, "I don't like the idea of killing innocents, but as they say, sometimes you have to get your hands dirty." He continued. "They say, huh? Then I'll take your word for it." He said, "Well, that's all. Hurry up, okay?" I said, "Very well. I'll leave immediately," he said, and then he started walking. The old desert warriors tried to stop him, but he paid them no attention and continued walking. Chapter 80, The First Mission, Part 1, Geno POV. Another month has passed since Leo joined our lives. Apart from that, nothing interesting has happened again. Except that Orsted contacted me again a couple of days ago to meet again. So like the good ally that I am, I woke up early, took a hot shower, and put on my best clothes, which were my black leather coat and some sweatpants. I should buy formal clothes in the future. I left home before the first ray of sunlight came over the horizon and headed to the forest where I met Orsted. "So the sacred beast, huh? It's a good choice. It's a creature with a strong destiny and great physical power," Orsted muttered. "Yeah, but I guess you didn't call me here just for that, did you?" I muttered. "No, I came here so you could do me a favor and do a mission, he said. Not a mission? I muttered, of what kind? It's not that difficult. I need you to go to the demon continent and save a demon named Valgyrus Orizaba. He may seem like a nobody now, but he will be of enormous help in the war against Laplace, Orsted explained. Of great help? How is he going to help? I asked him. He will lead an army of demons to fight on the human side in the new war against Laplace. His good opinion of humans led him to fight on their side, and if a human saves him now, his opinion will become more positive, Orsted explained. I see. So he's a future demon general? I asked. Basically, he will soon find himself in danger by being trapped in a cave in the north of the demon continent. Your mission is to go there and rescue him. Simple as that, Orsted continued. I see. But the nearest teleportation circle is near Sharia, and that's a month's journey. I muttered. No need. Rudeus is taking care of creating teleportation circles to all the places he has gone, and one of them is a couple of hours away from that cavern, Orsted said. And to get to that circle, which one is the closest here? I muttered. I have secretly installed one inside a cavern here. It will only be used once, and then it will be destroyed, Orsted said. Okay, just let me go get the necessary things, and I'll be right there, I said. Orsted nodded at this, and I returned home. When I returned home, Eris was already waiting for me with her arms crossed in her typical pose. Is something wrong, dear? I murmured. You met that bastard Orsted again, right? She said indignantly. Well, yes, but it's not what you think. I'm doing all this to protect all of you, I said. Why do you need Orsted to protect us? I don't need protection from you or anyone else. Rather, it seems that I should protect you, she said. Eris, it's something very important that I have to do. When I get back, I promise that I will explain everything to you, okay? I said. She narrowed her eyes as she looked at me and then sighed. Where are you going this time? She asked with resignation. Not too far. I won't be long, like I said before. I promise I'll tell everyone the reason for everything that's been happening when I get back, okay? I said to her with a smile, okay, at least have breakfast, she said as she dragged me into the kitchen. It was easier to convince the others that I would go to the outskirts of the sacred land of the sword because a bunch of morons challenged me. Nina didn't even care, and Ghislaine and Roxy had confidence in my abilities, so it wasn't that big deal. I was confident that it would be a quick mission, so I said it would take less than 3 days, at which point the dojo was left in charge of Nina. The next day, I met up with Orsted again to go to the teleportation circle. Okay, follow me, Orsted said as we began to walk through the forest. I followed him for a while until we came to a cave. I recognized this place. This was where I killed Galvin. Is something wrong? Orsted asked, seeing my expression. No, it's nothing. It's just that this is where I killed her the first time, I muttered. Okay, then let's continue, he said in an indifferent tone as we entered the cave. The place had obviously been cleaned up, but the dirt walls I had created back then were still standing, which brought back bad memories. It took us about 20 minutes walking inside the cave until we reached the teleportation circle. The blue light from this illuminated the area. Okay, any more specific information? I asked, of course. This circle will send you a few hours north of the city of Vigoya. When you arrive, walk north until you find a city that you will have to go to an adventurer's guild and ask for Greenskull, which is the nickname of Valgyrus. Everyone will tell you that he went to the snowy forest, that you will search inside the only cave in the place where he'll be trapped, he said. Okay, that's too much shit. I wish I had written that down. Okay, thank you very much. And what should I tell Valgyrus when I find him? I asked. There's nothing specific to tell him. Just tell him you're a human, and that's it, Orsted replied. Okay, then I'll see you later, I said, and jumped into the teleportation circle. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in a teleportation ruin similar to those in Sharia. So without wasting time, I went out and located myself towards where the north was. As I remembered from the anime, this place was a desert, but different from Begarit. This is a rocky desert, and Begarit is a sandy desert, but both are extremely hot. With water magic and my sword in hand, I was able to walk through the place without problems. Any monster that crossed my path was cut in two with a long sword of light. So it took me about 2 hours until I saw a city. The city of Baigoya, a walled city, and in the center of it is the Kisharika Castle. Without wasting time, I approached the city until I was stopped by some guards. Wait a minute, I don't know the demonic language. Morians, Bestrom's Imzapemtrum totem. One of the guards said, I assume you're asking for my ID. Gino Britzes. I muttered as I took out my adventurer card. The horse-faced guard looked at the card for a few moments and then nodded and handed it back to me. Vela, he said in demonic language as he moved out of the way. I nodded with a smile and entered the city. Despite not understanding any of the language, it was relatively easy to find the Adventurers Guild as it had the same identification symbol from my card as the crest on the building door. The laughter and chatter of some adventurers could be heard from outside, but when all this stopped, Quan vi ditrio Morians? One of the adventurers muttered, and everyone started laughing. The guy was probably laughing at me, but I couldn't understand it, so I'll let it pass. I approached the receptionist and gave him my adventurer card and a gold ring as a trade. I wish she knows the human language. I'm looking for Green Skull. I said. The receptionist was surprised and blinked several times while looking at me, but then nodded. All right, Green Skull is on a mission in the snowy forests. The receptionist muttered in a thick accent. Okay, which way is that place? I asked. It's not too far from Horror. Just head east of the city for an hour, she said. I nodded at this and left the place. As the receptionist said, it didn't take me even an hour to get there. The forest wasn't that big, and if you ask why it's called a snowy forest, don't ask me why. I can only say that the place is very cool compared to the desert, and also the trees block the sunlight, so it is fairly dark here. But that's not all. The trees emit a kind of light that gives the place a unique atmosphere. Okay, that looking the only cave in the place, right? I muttered to myself as I walked deeper into the forest. SSSSH. The hiss of a snake reached my ear, and I looked to the side in confusion. I was greeted by the image of a huge snake at least 10 meters tall. The damn thing looked like a cobra because of the bumps it had near its head, and it was red in color. The thing lunged at me at enormous speed, but with a long sword of light, I cut off its head, and it was stranded. An anticlimactic ending for a beast like this. Although this seemed to alert the other cobras why I was surrounded by about 6 more of these. Now that I think about it, they are quite dangerous monsters, and they are relatively close to the city. I guess these don't leave the forest because of the climate or something like that. I finished off the cobras fairly easily and continued my way through the forest. It took me about 3 hours until I reached what seemed to be a cavern that was actually a pronounced hole in the ground. Latamoy, Latami. A woman's voice reached my ears as I approached the place. When I turned around, I could see what seemed to be an orc woman. She was everything you would expect from someone like that. Red skin, huge muscles, and big tits, but that's different. Latamoy, Tepito Kebeb de Beers Rumtum. She screamed in despair, pointing towards the hole in the ground. Valgris, I muttered. The orc woman was surprised, but nodded as she continued to point at the cavern. I nodded at this as I began to delve deeper into the place. It was dark as you would expect in any cavern, and it was crawling with monsters. In general, it was plagued by monsters that reminded me of the bats that surrounded the succubi of Begarit. But the ones here were just giant bats. Me and the orc woman took care of some of them as we entered the place. The woman looked desperate and scared as she screamed Valgris' name every now and then, which attracted more bats. What happened to Valgris? I muttered. The ogre woman looked at me in surprise, but then shook her head as she continued to look down the road. We were both exploring Thes caverns, but we were ambushed by armored warriors. I was able to escape, but he was trapped. When I left the cave, I debated whether to go for help or go back, and in the end I stayed here. If I left, he would probably die. The ogre woman muttered sadly, I see. I murmured, and where do you know Valgris from? She asked. I don't know him personally. I only heard that he is one of the few ogres that are in the city. I said. The woman nodded to herself, satisfied with the explanation. So we spent about an hour searching the place, but we couldn't find Valgris. Chapter 61 to 80 is ended, and next chapter 81 to 100 is here. Thanks for watching. If you want to suggest me anything, please comment. Thank you. Only true anime fans will hit that subscribe button. Are you one of them? Comment on their favorite young adult fantasy audiobooks, and check your other videos for more recommendations.